Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. That night, Jon dreamed of riding a dragon, soaring so high that the men scrambling in the fields below were as small as ants. The last dragon died 150 years ago, a sickly small creature, misshapen with withered wings in King's Landing. She had laid a clutch of eggs and perished exhausted. None of the 5 eggs hatched, and Apigan III was named Dragonbane for the death, as Maesters claimed he hated dragons for devouring his queen mother. The Maesters were obviously wrong. No Targaryen would ever hate the sole reason the dynasty ever existed. Without the 3 dragons, Aegon the Great's conquest would have failed at Harrenhal, for that monstrous castle, fully manned and stocked, was impervious to a siege. Archmaester Marwyn claimed that for a century, the Citadel plotted the extinction of the dragons. That was an easy boast to make when the great beasts had disappeared. If one day the obsidian candles burned and magic returned to Westeros, he doubted that Marwyn would be so eager to repeat those words. Jon woke the next morning and focused on the tasks for the day. There was much to do and little time before they would ride. One lesson that Lord Stark had taught his heir was that, in battle, mobility beat numbers. A faster attacker could defeat a slower one on the right terrain, even with a smaller force. Any competent commander would have crushed Robert's rebellion, stillborn at birth. But the Crown forces had been lethargic and slow to react. Robb learned that lesson well, and Jon expected that, before noon, the entire army would be assembled on the western bank of the Trident, ready to march. He walked out of his tent to see men and horses continuing to march over the bridge. The mermen of the Mannerleys and the white ironwood tree of the Foresters had volunteered to bring the unused lumber, nails, and rope to Jon's wagons, although some of that had been transported by the Crane Knight on rafts. There were still Boltons on the east side, and Jon saw also the 2 rusted long axes of House Dustin and the gold horse of House Risewell. Those 3 houses were always together, and Jon pondered whether that held any hidden meaning. "Bastard! Come to have more people kiss your ass?" The young Greyjoy was not pleasant at any time of the day, but even more intolerable in the morning. "I certainly don't want you to kiss my ass," Jon said. "They think you are so great." Brandon the Builder, Reborn. The Thekion's words slurred, and Jon smelled the alcohol on his breath. The sun had been up less than an hour. Did Theon drink in the morning, or had he simply not stopped last night? Brandon the Builder had far greater achievements than a bridge across the Trident, Jon said, thinking of the wall 300 miles long and 700 feet high, made of solid ice. Still, the builder had not finished the wall in 7 days, even with the help of giants. "It won't last, bastard. They will destroy your bridge as soon as we leave." Theon spat, pointing to the many human weasels sneaking around the camp. The Exon was an ass, but not a total fool. The bridge threatened the entire purpose of the twins, and Walder Free certainly knew that. Jon wondered if Lord Free would send an assassin or simply ask one of his 30-odd sons and bastards to stab him in the dark. Jon met with the boys from Wintertown, manning the wagons. Shane and Dennis oversaw the storage of extra lumber and nails, while Chet and Clytus gathered the full crew to prepare them for the trip. Chet marked traveling assignments on parchment. The boys could not read or write, but they could spell their names, and most had good number sense. The major equipment, including the crane, hammers, and saws, had been disassembled and packed last night. "Lord Snow," Shane began as the other boys clustered around. "None of that. I am no lord, just Jon." "Maester Snow?" Shane continued stubbornly. "Men from the twins have been asking us questions this morning about the wood, the tools, and how the bridge was built. They have been offering silver stags for answers." Jon was not surprised. The phrase would have tried to ferret out any information possible. Better silver stags than copper stars, or worse, knives and clubs. "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing. We claim to know little and be only green boys that saw wood, hammer nails, and carry water." Shane crossed his eyes and opened his mouth to drool, sticking his tongue out to lick his left upper lip. He looked the very picture of one of the stupider Freys. Jon burst out laughing. "And did they believe that trick?" "Yes, Maester. The Frey man thought I was a lackwit. Highborns think of small folk as beasts of burden to be bled or sheared," Shane said. "Nothing good comes from spending too much time with highborns, begging your pardon, sir," Daenerys added with a touch of shame. I am no highborn. My father and siblings are honorable, but too often you would be right. Jon said soberly, Boys, be careful of the phrase. They offer stags now, but they may use bloodier means later. I would not have any of you harmed. Shane has the right of it. If they think you know little, they will make their attempts on me, and not at you. Stay close together and watch for each other. But sir, what about you? Shane asked. Jon was touched by the concern in their eyes. A silent white wolf appeared at Jon's side. I will be careful, and I have Ghost. The page from Flint's finger summoned Jon to Robb's tent. Frymen roamed outside the tent, clamoring for command positions, and pestering the great Jon, Lord Karstark and the Manderly brothers. Wayless looked embarrassed, Karstark annoyed, and the great Jon ready to explode. Jon heard mention of betrothals and fostering from the oily mouths of many Frys as they eyed the many northern lords and heirs with greed. Robb dismissed a few members of his honor guard. An older knight, perhaps a man of 20 years, and a few, wearing the 2 Blue Towers sigil, remained, instructing a nervous lad how to prepare Lord Stark's armor and weapons. The two had a strong resemblance and looked more human and less weaselish than other Freys. The boy was older than Robb, but appeared young and anxious to please. Jon, this is Sir Perwyn Frey and his brother Olyvar. Lady Stark has chosen Olyvar as my squire, Robb said. Maester Snow, Perwyn said, I have heard that you built the bridge across the river. The younger boy looked at him with awe. I am no maester, merely an acolyte. I have not yet forged my links, Jon said. Our third brother, William, just finished his studies at the Citadel. He spoke of a young northern boy who excelled at construction and smithing, even more so than the Archmaester of Iron, Perwyn said. Archmaster Norrin, I disagreed with him on the correct process to forge steel. Your pardon, Sir. I do not remember meeting your brother, Jon said. He was appointed to Longbow Hall in the Vale this year, Perwyn said. Then he must have done well at the Citadel. House Hunter is well respected, Jon said. Sir, I would have time alone with my brother, Robb said. The 2 Freys hastened to leave, although the younger boy looked back with open curiosity. When they left, Robb sighed and sat down. He poured water for his brother. Gods, we are swimming in Freys. They are everywhere, complaining about this, demanding that a dozen Freys asked for their sons to be squires. Hostine Frey says he should lead my battle guard as the strongest fighter. Ryman Frey tells me his father, Steffron Frey, is slow and stupid, and that I should look to him for advice. I doubt even 4,000 swords are worth this trouble. Jon chuckled. You need them, Robb. We cannot have 4,000 swords at our back.
Aye, Robb hesitated.
They do not like your bridge, Jon. Lorser Frey says the wooden bridge should be theirs by rights because the timber comes from Frey lands. A clever argument. I do not like them either, Jon said. Is something wrong, Robb? You look concerned about things other than the Freys. You and Arya could always read my mood, but you look troubled as well, Robb said. Aye, a bit. I saw frogs sneaking around the river this morning. They asked the boys from Wintertown questions, Jon admitted. No doubt they want to destroy the bridge. And how difficult would that task be? Jon's forehead scrunched a bit. It depends on what you mean by destruction. Knocking down the piers and posts would be hard. They are strongly locked together. But tearing apart the bridge road could be done. If you removed a single span, the bridge could not be used by men and horses, although it would still stand, Jon said. Robb sighed as he stroked Grey Wind's back. The dire wolf's amber eyes watched the tent flap, guarding his master. In contrast, Ghost stood in the shadows, ready to spring from the side. You are right. The Freys are not the only source of my troubles. It is Lady Stark. She wishes to know my plans for battle. And? Jon asked. I do not need to tell her, Robb snapped. She may be my lady mother, but she wishes to guide me on who to send and where. If I am to be Lord of Winterfell, I cannot have my mother planning my battles. A Stark must lead their men, not hide behind skirts. Jon thought Lady Stark had good intentions, but bad results. She merely cares for you. But you should also heed advice on your bannermen. You need to understand their abilities and motivations, just as they need to understand your plans. So must I tell them of my strategies? Robb asked. Not all of it, but men must know enough so they can follow your orders. The battlefield is a strange place. Your commanders may be injured or surprised, The lords must have confidence to follow your plans and know when to attack and to defend. Jon said. Robb took out the map of the Riverlands. The three forks of the Trident were drawn clearly and all the major castles marked. Robb had red and black counters to represent the Lannister and the Stark forces. He put black counters at the Twins, the north part of the Green Fork. Jaime Lannister and his men are at Riverrun 15,000 and growing according to the Raven. Tywin Lannister is on the other side of the Trident to the east with a much larger army. If he goes south to the Ruby Ford, he can go west and meet with the Kingslayer. We cannot defeat both armies, Robb said. Jon nodded. That certainly made sense. Jaime had won the first two battles of the war at Golden Tooth and near Riverrun. But Tywin Lannister, as the old lion, would have the stronger force and more experienced captains. I mean to divide our forces at the Green Fork. I will ride to ambush Jaime Lannister, but I will send men to lure Tywin Lannister north. The further Tywin goes toward the Twins, the harder it will be for him to reinforce Jaime. The Lannisters do not know we have secured the crossing, Robb said. How do you plan to lure Tywin north? How many men and who will lead? Jon asked. I plan to leave all of the infantry with Roose Bolton. He is experienced and cautious, Robb said. But he will have no cavalry? Jon asked. I will need all the horses I can get, Robb said. I do not like it, Robb. Your plan to lure the Lannister force north is clever, but Roose Bolton, even with every one of our foot soldiers, cannot defeat Tywin. The Lannisters have many knights and heavy cavalry. What if they manage to flank the army? Jon said. I need to divert Tywin. Even if I have to sacrifice men, it is needed to save Riverrun. It is not just my lady mother's family. We need a base, and the Tully lands are rich. But you do not need all of your troops, and you cannot afford to lose so many. You merely need enough to tempt Tywin into a chase. And you have something that the Lancers do not know about, Jon said. He placed a stick of wood onto the Green Fork of the Trident. But the bridge will hard to defend, Jon, Robb said, even against the Freys. Jon picked up the stick and snapped it into two. Who said anything about defending it? Robb smiled as he immediately grasped his brother's suggestion. Against a larger force. An attacker needed to be bold and clever. This trick might work, but more details were needed. Robb would have to select who would spring the trap. Jon left his brother alone to plan while he examined the bridge. Like Robb, he would ask only his most trusted people. Lord Rickard Karstark reddened when denied entrance by the guards. Haryon, Torrhen, and Eddard stopped, not certain whether they should cross the threshold. I will not stand for this. These are my sons, Karstark yelled, loud enough to attract the attention of Lord Bolton, the Grachan, and the She-Bear. Lord Karstark, I have an important mission for only the three, Robb said sternly. Remember the words of your vow. The Stark family will not ask any service that would bring dishonor on our men. I have chosen them because I believe them capable of executing this task. Lord Karstark grumbled and backed down while his sons entered the tent with Haryon in the lead, sitting down at Robb's table, which displayed the Riverlands map. The Karstarks had the same dark brown hair and strong features of their lord father, but the three were quite different, Jon thought. Haryon was proud and fierce, Eddard staunch and resolute. The middle brother was quiet and formal. Robb offered cups of ale, and Haryon drank his in one large gulp. I have a very important task, but I need a question answered. Who among you is least reckless, and most likely to retreat? Robb said. Haryon stood up abruptly, and Eddard put a hand on his brother to stop any confrontation. Is this a jape, Lord Stark? The heir to Carhold spat out. Sit down, my lord, Robb said, and Grey Wind bared his teeth. I need to know which of you three would keep his wits best if outnumbered and can handle a retreat. That would be Torrhen, Eddard said. He is the calmest of us three, which is why our sister likes him the best. The second brother did not dispute that and stared stony-eyed at Robb. Robb placed 2 red counters for Jaime at Riverrun, but 5 for Tywin midway between the Twins and Harroway. Tywin Lannister is to the east of the Trident. If he goes south of Harroway, he can follow the Red Fork to Riverrun. I need men to harry his forces and draw him north. But make no mistake, you cannot win a battle against Tywin. You can only delay him. You need to attack, but be able to retreat without much loss of life. Torrhen nodded, but his older brother was still angry. You mean to use my brother as a rabbit to bait a lion? Where is the honor in that? Harrion said. This is the interesting part. Jon, please inform them of the trap, Robb said. It is your plan, Lord Stark. I may have come up with the seed, but you developed and improved the idea, Jon said. I want your force to retreat to the bridge, and then after a few thousand Lannister men cross, we destroy the bridge, trapping them on the western bank. Robb placed his hand on the map at the point of the crossing. One red counter was separated from the Lannister forces. But can the bridge be so easily destroyed? A surprised Eddard asked. Not destroyed, but one span could be. Each span is made of a dozen logs set east to west, with planks on top. But a strong man underneath could sweep the logs and planks to the side. With the help of the Cranaman, I have tied ropes and hooks to the bottom of one stretch closer to the western side. With a Manderley boat, a few men with poles and axes could make the bridge unusable in a matter of minutes, Jen said. So the span would drop out and there would be a 20-foot hole in the bridge. Robb smiled. And we would have 2,000 Lannister cunts trapped, Harrion said, with the other parts of their army unable to help and only watching like an eunuch in a brothel. I suspect it would be their cavalry. They would be the fastest in pursuit, but the cavalry would have nowhere to go, and their backs to the river, Robb said. Even better, we could force them back on the bridge. We could use pikes to drive the horses back, and they would be easy to kill in the water, Torrhen said. The knights would drown in their armor. Don't let too many Lannisters over. Certainly not more than 2,000. Most of the force, including your father and his cavalry, will march for Riverrun. But a few of Jon's boys and the Cranon men will stay to break the bridge with a member of the Wintertown crew. I can give you some mountain clans, some flints and levies from Winterfell, Robb cautioned. Why us, Lord Stark? Why not a more experienced lord? Torrhen asked shrewdly. I want them to think you are green and foolish, easy prey. The Lannisters might be more wary around Lord Bolton. If they know you are coming, they will be eager to chase you. Robb said, if they know, you think there may be spies who might tell the Lannisters, or even lords who will complain that young boys received a command, and the word will spread in the camp, Eddard said. We are surrounded by Freys. One of the Walder's sons is married to Tywin Lannister's sister. That's why this plan stays private, even from your father, and why the one luring the Lannisters must not take any chances and pretend to retreat, Robb said. Word might spread to the Lannisters by spies, outriders, merchants, or small folk. I want them to believe that Robb Stark is a green boy who sent hot-headed fools with a motley crew of unprepared northerners. They will think you easy prey until they pass the bridge. Ha! Even our lords will question your plans. And if the Lannister scouts see such a small force, they will send their cavalry to chase. But when the bridge falls, Karstark men will crush the Lannister forces. Harrion laughed. My lord, let me ask a favor. Allow me to stay here and help Torrhen. He will lead them to the trap. But I will spring it. I will rip out the logs and tear away the floor. And then the river will run red with Lannister blood. Aye, but use the Crannog men, the Mountain men, and the Flints wisely. I have ordered Sir Helmund Tallhart to garrison the Twins with 200 archers and 200 swordsmen. Harrion, let him know the plans, but make certain that no one overhears. It must be a surprise, Robb said. The Crannog are aware, Pete and Boggs. They can help with the bridge, and I will leave Shane here. He is a clever lad, and help place the hooks on the bottom of the span. Shane will show you where to rip the logs away into the Trident. Mature and Manderley would be the best to pilot the boat, Jon said. The rest of the Northern Army will march today. I will take the Freys, but I will order a few to stay behind to gather more men and assist Tallhart. You may involve them near the end, Robb said. Lord Stark, I would be happy to lead the men, but I worry about the Freys. Can we trust them? What if they betray us or damage the bridge before I return? Torrhen asked. I will kill those lying cunts if they betray us. Harrion raged. The oldest Karstark was a good fighter, but hot-headed. Jon was glad that Torrhen would lead the troops on the eastern front. I think we could rely on Perwyn Frey. Dulivar, his brother, is Robb's squire, so he would not betray us. Plus, he seems a decent fellow, unlike his brothers. If Robb asked him to follow your orders, he may be a useful ally at the Twins, Jon said. Lady Catelyn is in negotiations with Lothar Frey. She has told him that so long as the army can cross at the Twins with no toll, we would let them have the wooden bridge when our garrison leaves. We never said it would be usable, though, Robb smirked. The three Karstarks boys laughed uproariously, so loud that House Stark guards peeked through the tent flaps to make certain everything was fine. Harrion and Torrhen promised that they would not tell their father the full plans, but only that the mission was important and would bring great glory to the Karstark name. The two swore that Karstark men would not be rash in executing the trap. "Any last concerns, Lord Stark or Maester Snow?" Harrion said, as they were leaving the tent. "Aye, be careful with the lives of the men. We have 20,000, but the Lannister army is larger and they can be reinforced from the west. Pretend to attack, but your goal is to lure them to us. And be cautious until the bridge is broken. Then you can smash the lion with all your might," Robb said. Jon hesitated a bit, unused to nobles asking him for advice. "I would try to take as many prisoners as possible. If we can capture lords and knights, it would enhance your glory and give us leverage to ransom our father. Imagine your fame if you capture the old lion. The North would remember your names in song forever." The Karstark heir and his two brothers left the tent, looking as if ready to march in a triumph in King's Landing. Harrion's excitement was obvious in his broad, open face, and Torrhen walked with a spring in his step. They would make poor spies, but Jon understood and sympathized with their reaction. The three boys were older than Robb and Jon, but had not been blooded in a war. Harrion had been too young when the banners were called for the Greyjoy Rebellion. The North respected strength in arms, and glory in battle would let the heir of Corrid Old escape his father's large shadow. They will not capture Tywin Lannister with a broken bridge. He is too cunning to fall for such a trick, Robb said. "I think Torrhen will keep his head, though. Even defeating 1,000 Lannisters would be a victory. Bringing down the head lion will not be easy, but he has many retainers. They may be more eager and less wary." "Should I inform the Manderleys and the Crannibal now?" Jon asked. "What did you tell me about raising a banner?" "Harrion and Torrhen have their orders. Let them deal with the eastern side of the fork. We need to make plans to fight the Kingslayer. We need to destroy the smaller Lannister host before we can face the larger one." Rose said, "What do we know of the siege at Riverrun? How many rivermen did the Kingslayer face? And how did he win so easily?" Jon asked. Robb sighed. "Edmure Tully is well-meaning but not well-planned. He wanted to protect his men, so he sent forces west to guard the passes against the Westermen. He sent men to the south to protect Stony Sepat and Acorn Hall, and cavalry to the east to search for the mountain. Every single group was outnumbered and crushed by the Kingslayer, the mountain, and Tywin's host. When he was about to march from Riverrun, the Kingslayer caught him under the walls of the castle and captured him and part of the Tully forces. But surely with Riverrun as a base, he had enough troops to fight 15,000 men to a draw. With fresh men and supplies, Father could hold Winterfell against a force of 50,000. "How did he lose under the walls of Riverrun?" Jon asked. "What do you know about the Riverlands and House Tully?" Rose said. Jon blinked. What everybody else does. The Tullys have been lords paramount since Aegon's conquest. The Riverlands lack strong natural borders, like the neck or the mountains of the Vale, or the deserts of Dorne. So many wars and great battles have been fought there, even duels between dragons. There are a number of houses with a storied past, the Blackwoods and the Darys. And that is part of the problem, Robb said, smiling. On this, I actually know more than you. Now, I am the Maester, and you are the student. Jon broke out in a laugh. "All right, Maester Robb. Tell me what I must know." "The Tullys are lord paramounts, but their hold is weaker than most. There are many old rivalries in many of the other houses. The Wents, the Mollisters, the Mootons believe with some justice that their heritage and history is greater than the Tullys. In Robert's rebellion, House Mooton, Darry and Rhaegar sided with the dragons against my grandfather's orders. And the Tullys are not military men. They have never needed to be. Riverrun can be held with a small garrison, and the Tullys have long used marriages to curry influence. Hoster Tully kept his power by marrying his daughters to the north and to the Vale. House Tully is not like House Stark. The Starks have fought wars for 1,000 years at the front lines. We breathe battle. It is in our blood, and what we train for all our lives. House Tully does not," Robb said. "But surely, even if the Tullys don't have many men, their vassals must." "The Riverlands have a great many people and much wealth," Jon said. "Perhaps, but their lords are divided and quarrelsome. The Riverlands should command as many men as the North, but the truth is their muster is much lower. They rarely unite, even against an obvious enemy like the Lannisters. Look at the Freys, they did nothing, even while their liege lord is besieged. The forces of the Riverlands are scattered, and the Tullys have never been able to coordinate them well, Robb said. I see. Jon thought for a bit before turning to his brother with a smile. This is simply a game of Saivas. How so? Robb asked, perplexed. Jon took out his simple set and scattered white troops on the edges of the board. Your uncle, Edmure, has sufficient forces, but instead of defending the king, his pieces are strewn on all sides of the Riverlands, the western, the crossroads, and the south. Jon clustered the black troops in the center. The Kingslayer marshaled his army to attack in Riverrun and defeated the Tullys, but the other white pieces are not destroyed. There are still rivermen out there, and we need to bring them together. Jon moved the white pieces inward, the heavy and light horse, the elephants, the trebuchet, and the catapults. Spearmen and crossbowmen supported the lines of attack. We can trap the Kingslayer, we need to break his formation and lure him out. Aye, but to do so, we need surprise. If the Kingslayer detects our presence, he will send a raven to his lord father. Then the Lannisters will have more pieces on the board. We can defeat an army of the same number, but not 1, 2 to 3 times larger. That is why we need to strike hard and fast before they discover that we have crossed the ford, Rode said. It is a long distance to Riverrun, Jon said. Aye, 200 miles, and the roads are not good. We will be riding through meadows and forests. Our fastest horsemen could do that in 2 days, Robb said, but the infantry will take much longer. Even at a forced march, it would take over a week, Jon cautioned. The first attack must be cavalry, Jon. We need surprise. We cannot wait until the Kingslayer sets his lines. Robb insisted. Jon nodded. He had no doubt about Robb's tactical abilities or instinctive grasp of the battlefield. But that certainly did not mean the problem was easily solved. Robb would have to leave the infantry behind, and Jon thought with the pang. The siege machines. Wagons could not possibly travel that quickly, and with only the cavalry, the north would be easily overnumbered. Jon wondered if there were other rivermen they could rally to their cause. After their defeats by the Lannisters, though, they would either be sulking by their castles, or dispersed into the winds. What do you need me to do, Robb? Jon asked. That question would have to wait. Catelyn Stark rushed into the tent, urgency written on her face. She was in such a hurry that she could not even bother to spare a look of disgust for Jon. Robb, you must come out, Lady Stark said. Robb stood up and beckoned Jon to follow him. There outside the tent, a tall and lean man dressed in gray ringmail over blackened leather handed the reins of a gray warhorse to Olyvar Frey. The man had gray hair, and his handsome features were craggy and worn, from years of exposure riding outside to guard the mountains of the moon. He held a great sword in the mailed glove of his left hand, and the haggard but clean-shaven face broke into a small smile when he saw Catelyn Stark. But it was the sigil that told Jon the identity of the guest. The man took off a blue and red cloak, Tully colors, to reveal his brown surcoat, dirty from the road. There, on his chest, a black trout leapt on a field of blue and mud red. Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, stood before them. The tent was so full that the heirs had difficulty squeezing in as news of Sir Brynden Tully's appearance spread through the camp. All the lords of the north, great and small, assembled to find out more about that development. Jon listened to the whispers and surprised murmurs that the Blackfish was not directing the siege at Riverrun. Of course he wasn't, Jon thought. His leather armor was dusty from the road, but showed no rips, notches, and tears from battle. Catelyn Stark wished her uncle to be placed next to her son. That fell on deaf ears, as Stifron, Lord Freys' heir, commandeered a prize seat to the left, and Robb insisted that Jon deserved to sit at the right. As a trusted advisor, Jon ignored the glares from Lady Stark. That price for her anger might be paid after the war, when he tried to return to Winterfell with his siblings. But that seemed a distant concern. What news from the Vale or Riverrun, Blackfish? Lord Karstark boomed. That question should have been asked by Robb, but his brother ignored the slight. No news that is good. When Lady Stark left the Eyrie, I asked Lady Lysaren for the Knights of the Vale. She refused and said the knights were needed to defend against Lannisters. I spoke then to the Lords of the Vale, many who remember and love Ned Stark well and consider the charges against him to be false. They would have sent their household guards and heirs, Bronze Yohn Royce, Lord Redfort and Lady Waynwood, pledged 5,000 men, but Lady Arryn forbade any to leave by the Bloody Gate, so I resigned and rode north, Brendan said. Uncle, have you heard anything of Riverrun? Robb said. Not besides news that it is besieged by Jaime Lannister and that Edmure Tully has been taken hostage. Lannister men control the River Road and threaten the High Road. Even the King's Road swarms with lions. Only a large force of seasoned and well-armed men could pass safely, without being torn apart by sellswords and scouts in the Lannisters' service. I planned to go to Moat Cailin, but crossed when I saw the wooden bridge, Brendan said. So the Blackfish leads no men at all, Ryman Fry sneered. Brendan Tully stared at the corpulent knight, second in line to the crossing, and ignored snickers from the other Frys. Why would my sister refuse to help? Catelyn asked. The Blackfish shrugged. Many ravens flew back and forth between the Eyrie and King's Landing before I left. Peter Baelish has great influence over Lady Arryn. He is no friend of Ned Stark or the North. In the downcast reaction in the tent, few people observed the look of anguish on Catelyn Stark's face. Jon remembered that Baelish had claimed the Valyrian steel dagger belonged to Tyrion Lannister. What other lies had this Baelish told, and why? The mood of the lords was greatly soured by Lady Arryn's intransigence, an entirely justified reaction. The Vale could raise 25,000 men, brave warriors steeped in honor and chivalry, who had proven their worth in the rebellion. Knights from the Vale would threaten Tywin Lannister on the east, forcing the Lannisters to retreat south to Duskendale or King's Landing. Wheat, corn, and barley were grown in the Vale, and while it was not as fertile as the Reach, that bounty of grain and the port of Gulltown could form reliable supply lines for the Northern Army. Thank you for the news, Yerds. His face and manner betrayed no concerns or worries. A good ruler must inspire his men, and Robb treated the setback as something to be overcome and not feared. Other lords in the tent did not share that even temperament, but the Freys were loudest in their muttering. Lord Stark, I have come to pledge my sword to you, Brendan said. And I accept it, sire. House Stark is glad for your loyalty, Robb said. There was no space in the tent to kneel, but they exchanged the standard oath of fealty. Lead our men well. What men? Ryman jibed. I see one man. The Blackfish leads only himself, and he is old. Ryman, you couldn't lead a shit to a chamber pot. The Blackfish snapped. Fat Ryman, Frey quivered, but a few of the other Frey knights glared back and slipped fingers on their blades. The Blackfish did not move, but other men in the North, veterans of past battles, did, and Jon had no doubt who the North would support in any clash. Uncle, what role did you serve in past wars? Robb asked, ignoring the hostile looks. I was an outrider for my brother, Hoster Tully, against the Ninepenny Kings in the Stepstones. Sutter Gerald Hightower sent me to track Mayorlas the Monstrous and the Abin Prince back to their hideout. Mayorlas chased our scouts into a trap, and Lord Baratheon and the Kingsguard finished the Pretender. I fought for Lord Arryn in both Robert's Rebellion and against the Greyjoys at Pike. Brendan said, the Blackfish glossed over the true story. Sir Barristan Selmy was not yet a member of the Kingsguard when he cut through the Golden Company to slay Maxleys in single combat. The Blackfish was a veteran of dozens of battles and saved Hoster Tully's life from Jon Connington in the Battle of the Bells. A lesser man would have allowed his brother to be slain and become regent over Riverrun. The Blackfish's valor at the Battle of the Trident was praised in song as he wounded Prince Lewin Martell and stopped the Dornishmen from crossing the river. Most fools believed that Rubyford was single combat between the Targaryen prince and Robert Baratheon, but had the Seven Kingsguard defended their prince, the songs would be far different, Jon thought. Sir Brendan, I would ask you to serve again as an outrider. I will give you 200 horse, the fastest riders in the host. You would be charged with shooting down ravens and slaying Lannister scouts as we make our way south. Robb said. I will not serve under the Blackfish, Ryman Frey declared. Enough, Sir Ryman. The Freys are pledged to House Stark. My uncle will have the fastest light horses in the army, Robb said. Rosier looked terrible, his skin pale and eyes would like a blind boy without a horse over you. I cannot imagine a worse scout unless I wished to tell our location to the Kingslayer. Brendan retorted, My lords, we march for Riverrun. Sir Brendan will lead the outriders to give us intelligence. I will ride with my guard and the rest of the cavalry. The infantry and supply train will follow last, but Torrhen and Harry and Karstark will keep 3,000 men to range on the eastern side of the Green Fork. Robb spoke no further about that mission, despite the curiosity of many northern lords, and the grumbling of Rickard Karstark. "Will we have enough men to face Jaime Lannister?" a worried Stephen Frey asked. The heir to the crossing clearly did not want to battle the Lannisters without the full army. "Lord Stark, if you ride south with the cavalry, it will take the men a long time to follow. The roads are poor between here and Riverrun. You will open up a large gap between your forces, and it will take many days to close." Rosieros Bolton said in a low voice, "It will be difficult to defeat the Lannisters with cavalry alone. Jaime Lannister is the greatest knight in the Seven Kingdoms. His forces went through the Tullys like an axe through melted butter," Raymond Frey said. "You cannot gamble the lives of our horse without reinforcements. We need more rivermen. Send a raven to the Blackwoods, or the Brackens. Even the useless pipers and vances would help." Jon had no doubt the Lannisters were watching both houses carefully. A raven to the Blackwoods might get through, but the Brackens were situated south of the River Road. Any half-competent commander would intercept a raven to Stonehenge, and Jon wondered if the Brackens and Blackwoods were fighting on the same side, given their long and bloody feud. "The Kingslayer is like everyone else. The Lannisters have heavier and prettier armor. That does not make them unbeatable," the Blackfish said. "My nephew Cleos Frey says that Jaime Lannister has not been defeated for 20 years. He rides with him and claims he is truly a lion in battle," Ryman said. "And how would that little shit know? Jaime Lannister never fought in the Battle of the Trident except for breaking his oath. He was in King's Landing during the Greyjoy Rebellion. Stabbing his sister is no great achievement. Did he fuck your nephew too?" the Blackfish asked. "My lords, I have decided our orders. The cavalry rides for Riverrun, and the infantry follows. Lord Karstark and Lord Bolton will take charge of the infantry march." Robb said, "Jon, will you be able to bring your crew and machines south? The boys are young and small. They could travel on the back of a horseman. But the wagons and equipment require wagons. We could take a few tools, shovels, and saws, but the trebuchets and ballista will be late to any battles," Jon said. "Men cannot fight with a fool behind them in the saddle. What do we need those half-wits for? Better to leave them behind," Ryman said. Jon wondered if Sir Ryman had been truly deceived, or merely wanted to put the boys to the question. Jon felt no need to defend the Wintertown crew. The Northmen were proud of their bridge, and the Umbers and the Karstarks in particular looked less than pleased. Ryman Frey never gave any counsel in war that was well received. At least Stephen Frey had the wisdom to be quiet, rather than be confirmed as a noxious fool. "We ride today. I understand your concerns, Lord Bolton, but we are west of the Green Fork, and the Lannisters will be unable to cross the Trident and drive a wedge between the horse and the men. I am more concerned about Lannisters to the south than to the east. Jon has 24 boys. I would ask my honor guard to find space for them. If not on their own horse, then to have 2 boys ride on a single supply horse," Roach said. The crowd dispersed, and Haustin Frey, the brawniest and quite stupid-looking Frey knight, bragged to all that he would kill Jaime Lannister in single combat. Haustin might be braver than most, but Jon doubted that the Lannisters would lose any sleep over that boast. The Kingsguard was famed for their martial prowess, and Jaime was reputed to be either second or first sword with Barristan Selmy in skill. The Kingslayer was incredibly quick, and even several men working together would find him difficult to defeat. Jon shook off those thoughts, and waited for the tent to empty. He had to speak with Robb. Robb and Jon waited outside their tent for Olivard Frey to return with Brynden Tully. Many horsemen volunteered to join the Outriders, and the Blackfish was screening the men and examining the horse. Skill at archery and quickness were prized for scouts, and Jon was not surprised to hear the Umber air curse when he failed the inspection. The small Jon was a doughty warrior, but speed and stealth was not his specialty. The small Jon's horse was slightly larger than a moose. Brynden Tully and Catelyn Stark walked over, and Oliver poured cups of water to drink. The Blackfish looked to Robb's right, and while there was suspicion, Jon did not detect any disdain. That was better than he could say for Lady Stark. "Uncle, this is Jon Snow," Robb said, "the maester who built the bridge. Quite a remarkable achievement, but I doubt the phrase will think that." Brynden said dryly, "Jon and I have spoken, and we have the same mind on the importance of these questions. What can you tell us about the Kingslayer?" Robb asked. "He was a promising knight before he broke his oath. But you know that already. Brendan said. Sir Tully, what of your personal dealings with the Yangli Lannister? Robb says you have met him before, Jon said. Aye, when he was a squire to a Lord Crakehall, his father considered a betrothal to Lady Lysa and sent him to Riverrun for a fortnight. He was 10 and 4 and didn't say more than 5 words to Lysa. He hounded me for stories about the 9 Penny Kings and skirmishes against the Golden Company and House Blackfire. Of course, House Blackfire was just one man, and Maxley's was a monster, like what the Kingslayer has become. Brendan said, And have you met him since, Uncle? Robb asked. I have had the misfortune to see him again. I have ignored him and refused his requests to spar or speak. Why should I? He stabbed his king in the back, and now he fucks his sister, just like the Mad King. Brendan spat. And how would Jaime Lannister react if he knew you were near Riverrun? Jon asked. The cunt would love to capture me. He would like nothing better than to see me bend the knee, and in my own Tully lands no less, the Blackfish said. Jon saw the same understanding in his brother's eyes. Such a reaction would be an immense help, and anything that clouded the Kingslayer's judgment worked in their favor. Lady Stark had not understood her son's purpose. But after a half a minute, the Blackfish realized what Robb and the bastard brother meant, but did not say. You want me to lure the Kingslayer out into a trap, Brendan said. If the riders carried a banner with the Blackfish as a sigil, Jaime Lannister would think you rallied a few hundred Tully men behind you. He would not know it was the Northern Army, and also that the Knights of the Vale could not cross the Riverlands without alerting Lord Tywin. He would think you had a small force only, and would ride forth to capture you personally. We could ambush him then, Jon said. You will not risk my brother's life, Catelyn Stark said. Her tongue omitted the word bastard, but her eyes did not. No war is without risk, and I have lived too long to worry about dying. The Blackfish said, It is a good plan, and I know a place where an ambush can be set. Only a few miles from Robintree Hall, there is a forested valley with no name. It is quiet there, with little game or even birds. Univar, can you speak to your brother in secret? Can we make a banner with Tully red and blue, and a black trout? I would have it finished before noon, Robb asked his squire. My sister Rosin is a good seamstress. She can sew that banner quickly, my lord, Ulavai said before Robb dismissed him to search out Perwyn and Roslyn. The Blackfish thought more about the plan as Lady Stark stewed in silence. She stared away, unhappy with both her son and the bastard. Lord Stark, you only have 4,000 horse, and 1,000 are Freycunts who thinks the sun shines out of the Kingslayer's ass. The Westermen have heavy cavalry, and their knights and horse both wear mail and plate. If they mount a charge, they could sweep you away and escape the valley, the Blackfish said. For Robb and Jon, that had been a real worry. Northern cavalry fought as bravely as any anointed knight, but smaller coursers and sturdy garrons handled the cold better. The mighty destriers, tall, strong, and high-spirited beasts, foundered in the snow and required far more feet. Few northern houses wore even mail barding, but the southern warhorse was used to the plate mail of the tourney, which only the gold mines of the Lannisters could easily afford. My brother and I would have to see the valley, Sir Brendan. We need to know more before we can spring our trap, but the banner will be the key, and if we can take Jaime Lannister, his troops will be easier prey, Rode said. Your plan has promise. In war, forcing your opponent to make a wrong move is a good step. The Blackfish said, with a look of approval at both the young wolf and the bastard. Our plan is not complete. It will be better with more thought, and better still when we understand the Lannister forces and the terrain, and when we can truly prepare, Robb said. A pretty girl with white skin, brown hair, and a small, delicate face entered with Perwyn and Olivar. But both Robb and Jon had more pressing issues on the minds, and left the tent in different directions to deal with those concerns. Jon checked again with the Wintertown boys. They had finished packing the wagons early, and many yawned, having worked long through the night to disassemble the siege machines, oil the wagon wheels, and collect as many of the scarce nails that could be reused. Shane was embedded with the Cranachamine, and Jon hoped the small size of the neck dwellers would protect the boy from scrutiny. He did not want Harry and Karstark to gut a fray on Shane's behalf. Chet, Clytus, and Denys had informed the other boys about Robb's orders to march. Chet, as his second-in-command, would ride with Jon, but Clytus and Denny had a lively feud over who would ride with Daisy Mormont. Jon thought they would be far less eager when they saw her wickedly sharp, spiked mace. Daisy was kind, but like the entire Mormont clan, would not allow anyone to take liberties. Bear Island had taught that lesson to wildling raiders and Iron Islanders many times, and Daisy was a fearsome fighter. "We can't carry much, but each of you have a small pack for nails and knives. I would strap a tool to your back. A shovel, a saw, or a hammer," Jon said. "So sure." A boy could also bring a wheel wrapped in sheepskin. You never know when extra wheels would be needed. Clyda said to many nods. "The ironwood could be carried as well. It is strong and light." "I never heard of ironwood trees to the south." Daenerys added, "Right, and I plan to carry this." Jon took out from his trunk the light crossbow with a steel winch. He had built the weapon in the Reach, but on the trip south of Winterfell, he had designed special bolts. He handed over the crossbow to eager scrutiny and wide eyes. But it was the ammunition that was his secret pride. After the hubbub died down, Jon addressed the Wintertown crew again. "Boys, I do not want you to fight. Let the soldiers with you deal with any Lannister men. Do not be a hero and die. You are too valuable for that." "But Master Snow, why do you have a crossbow then?" Chet asked. "I will stay by my brother's side. Rogue's life is a key to our victory, and it is no regular crossbow." Jon smiled. They arrived at the forested valley on late morning of the third day. Robe left most of the cavalry behind to drink their fill in the clear waters of the Blue Fork. He wanted his men to be well rested before any battle. They passed Old Stones yesterday, the ruined castle raised by the kings of the river and the hills. Christopher Mudd IV won 99 battles, and lost the last, but that final battle broke the first men south of the Neck. The Riverlands submitted to the Andal invasion soon after, leaving only a few barrows and haunted memories. Robb's personal guard had bought the crew, and the Wintertown boys dismounted to survey the woods. Only a few other lords had come. Lady Mormont the Greatjon and Jason Mallister, the fierce and handsome ruler of Seaguard. The Silver Eagles had marched to Riverrun only after the Frey army ride south. House Mallister had much experience with Walder Frey and none of it good. Lord Mallister and his heir Patrak rode as far away as possible from Frey knights, and Jon realized the rivalries of the Riverlands were bitter indeed. In the north, such hatred would lead to blood feuds so hot, one family would be torn out, root and stem. In the south, enmity simmered underneath for decades. Jon wondered which was better. Jon descended from his horse and walked swiftly down the valley, Ghost ambling at his side. He could hear in the background Brynden Tully briefing Robb Stark on intelligence gathered in the last day, and the mention of Carol Vance and Mark Piper. The Blackfish was not the only Riverlander raiding the Lannisters, but Jon had no time to waste on such speculation. Robb could handle the tactics and coordinate the various forces. Jon would deal with battle control. The forest was beautiful, lush with spruce, soldier pines, and oak trees, planted by the children of the forest thousands of years ago. A thick carpet of dead leaves lay underfoot, and a rocky stream bubbled through the valley next to the path underneath the wooded ridges. The trees were so thick that shadows fell on the horses, even in the mid-morning light. Jon asked Chet to bring him the spyglass, and his voice echoed loudly off the valley walls. The acoustics of the woods magnified noise, so a man would have to whisper to not be overheard. That was interesting. At the northern end of the valley, the path narrowed and bent like a cocked arrow. Jon pictured the battle in his mind. Brynden Tully would ride into the valley from the south. Robb would hide his men to the east and west, and they would surge down through the ridges to attack the Lannister force. The Blackfish would turn and with reinforcements seal the northern side. It was a good choke point and a natural area to make a stand. The Blackfish's scouts, though, were lightly armored with leather and chain. If Jaime Lannister hesitated, then the North would win the day. But if Jaime mustered a few dozen knights and they charged at full speed, they would shear through the outriders, and crooked path or not, they could escape the valley, forcing a pitched and bloodier engagement, or even worse, escape to raise the alarm. "What do you think, Jon?" Robb asked in a low voice, as Grey Wind snarled at a white snow shrike out of his reach. The bird trilled sharply, as if it knew the dire wolf could not reach. "It is a good place for an ambush, but I worry about the Lannisters mounting a full charge." "Do we know more about the Lannister forces?" Jon said. "Yagsi Lannister has at least 3,000 cavalry, and possibly more. With Rivermen beaten at Golden Tooth, reinforcements have been trickling east over the hill road. We have heard that Vance and Piper forces have been raiding his supply lines to the south. He is using his cavalry to shield the infantry besieging Riverrun," the Blackfish said. Jon nodded. Those were standard siege tactics. Cavalry foraged, protected foragers, and fended off nuisance attacks, while the infantry stayed close enough to encircle but far enough to avoid arrows. Siege weapons bombarded castle walls. How are the knights equipped, sire? Plate mail, great swords, and heavy lances. We have met a few deserters. They say the Kingslayer's knights overwhelmed the Rivermen with a charge at both the Golden Tooth and at Riverrun. Ser Brynden said. We cannot allow them to charge. They will break through the trap, Jon said. And how do you expect to do that? The Blackfish asked skeptically. There were ways, Jon thought. He could light the valley on fire, dig trenches, and fill them with water from the river, or even litter the path with caltrops made from nails spiked through wood. But all three would kill the Outriders first, and despite Lady Stark's opinion, he was not bastard enough to sacrifice her uncle. House Stark would not knowingly condemn good men to death. I will make certain the Lannisters do not escape to the north side. I can build catapults, Jon said. The Blackfish was surprised, but Robb readily accepted his brother's words. We need to move quickly, Robb cautions. Every day that passes is a day that Tywin Lannister may send troops to Riverrun. This afternoon, the Outriders will harry the Lannister forces and carry the Blackfish's banner. If he sees the Kingslayer riding out, Ser Brynden will lure him to the valley tonight. You will only have a few hours to prepare. I will need a few men. Give me Small Jon, Umber, and the Foresters, Jon said. He turned to his boys and began to give orders to saw wood and gather the nails and tools together. Several sets of wooden wheels were strewn on the earthen path. Robb walked back to his guard, relaying instructions to the Smallgene, Roderick and Ethan Forrester to help Jon. My lord, I know your brother is skilled, but he cannot build a catapult in the forest. He has few saws and hammers, but no rope, no steel, and no way to shape wood. There are only a few rocks here large enough to be used as a missile, the Blackfish said. Robb thought about the story of the general raising the banner. I trust my brother, Sacre. If he says he can stop the Lannisters, then he shall. We have other responsibilities. Late in the afternoon, Jon put a finger to his lip to shush the Small Jon, who quivered with excitement at the low rumble of horses galloping. Through his spyglass, he saw the clouds of dust following the Blackfish and his men, the banner of a black trout on a field of blue and red fluttering from the wind. He handed the instrument over, and the Small Jon and the Foresters took turns looking into the distance. Jon scanned the valley and saw the glint of spears and axes hiding on the ridges above. Much of the northern cavalry had dismounted to fight, so they could surge down on both sides. Ghost stared south, hard red eyes looking for the approaching enemy. With the naked eye, Jon could make out the Blackfish's gray horse closing rapidly on the path. Only a few minutes now. Initially, Robb had planned to spring the trap by blowing horns. For some odd reason, the Karstarks, Mormonts, and Umbers all carried long war horns carved from wild cattle. The Freys and the Mallisters also used bronze trumpets to rally their troops, like a bizarre mummer's performance. Jon convinced his brother to use the acoustic nature of the valley in a less musical and more functional way. Brynden Tully thundered by, the rest of his riders on his heels. Jon saw the gleaming golden armor of the Kingslayer, the flowing crimson cloak, and a white warhorse in gold barding. He turned to signal Chet while Roderick and Ethan Forrester pushed the machines forward. The Small Jon lifted up an enormous rock and screamed a deafening yell that echoed through the valley. Fire the catapults. The Small Jon hurled the rock, the missile landing well short of Jaime Lannister. A few stones whirled from staff slings whizzed over the path, and landed closer but still in front of the Desterias. Jon had no doubt that they were visible now, the wooden frames, levers, and bars of the catapults turning the heads of the Lannister knights. Jon Snow devised his plan with three principles in mind. Tywin Lannister had a fearsome reputation as a great commander, but his military ideas and tactics were basic. The most powerful, conventional weapon was heavily armed horsemen charging en masse. Hundreds of years of warfare proved that knights riding in a loose formation and then accelerating to maximum impact was devastating to almost any opponent. The most important element of the charge, which was difficult to master, was keeping a steady line with fixed spaces as horses galloped to full speed. That was the reason why skill at the joust was praised in knights and why the Dothraki raiders, born to gallop, were feared. Jon had no doubt that the Lannister knights had trained relentlessly to charge in waves toward the enemy line. The second principle was the nature of cavalry versus artillery. Jon had researched siege warfare by reading scrolls and books on battles between cities in Essos during the death throes of Old Valyria. A smug archmaester had told him not to bother, as men on horses could crush any siege weaponry not heavily guarded behind walls or infantry troops. Most catapults had a range of several hundred feet, and even Valyrian artillery could reach only a third of a mile, and take time to reload. A cavalry charge could cover that distance in 20 seconds. If the initial shot missed, the crew could not reload and shoot before they were speared by a lance. When the Lannister knights saw the siege weapons in the open, they would gallop toward them. That reaction had been conditioned by generations of mounted combat. And the last principle was the simplest. He had read this in an ancient Valyrian mathematics book. Magnitudes are in equilibrium at distances, reciprocally proportional to their weights. This was the science behind the lever. A small weight could exert a great force with a fulcrum and a long enough bar. This humble machine could move mountains. Jon built a sturdy metal fulcrum and fitted the long ironwood plank on top. Only that hard black wood would be strong enough to withstand the massive force applied. The short end of the lever was under a large mishmash of wooden boards, nails, and bars, a catapult seen by the Lannister knights. The small Jon had climbed up a crudely constructed ladder to a high tree branch and jumped, all 250 pounds of solid muscle down on the long end of the ironwood lever. As the plank slammed down on the ground, the mass of wood soared into the air and smashed straight into the Lannister horses, sharpened wood spikes and nails, jutting out like a giant hedgehog. Again, Jon shouted. Chet and two boys rolled over on a crude three-wheeled dolly, another misshapen jumble of boards and spikes. Denys and Clytus set the short side down, and Chet positioned the next catapult on the short end of the fulcrum. Roderick and Ethan had climbed up to the tree branch, and as the boys went safely to the side, the foresters jumped down, springing the large mass directly into the path of the charge. Again and again, the small Jon and the foresters jumped onto the elevated long bar, and the magnified force rained down crude voluminous objects onto the path. With the nails and the last bits of ironwood supplemented by freshly cut pine and oak, Jon and the Wintertown crew had built 8 such machines that now littered the battleground, even as roaring Northmen rushed down from 3 sides to hew and slash at the stunned opponents. The Lannister cavalry was well trained, but no horse would charge into a wall or, even worse, spikes jutting out of barriers that appeared from nowhere. As the knights attempted to evade this new obstacle course, the horses smashed into each other and the valley descended into chaos. After the 8 catapults were gone, the small Jon and the foresters continued the bombardment, lobbing logs, branches, and heavy rocks into the crowd. On witnessing the destruction wreaked, the Blackfish and several outriders stepped in front, guarding the Wintertown crew and the liver against any Lannister swords. The small Jon roared, his boisterous laugh filling the valley, a sentiment echoed by the victorious Umbers and Mormonts, who had smashed in the entire right side. Dozens of knights had fallen, and many more men-at-arms surrendered. In fact, many Lannister men had been trapped against the broken catapults by their own comrades, hemmed in by a circle of screaming northern warriors. Robb was about to win a great victory. Then Jaime Lannister dismounted from his horse. Jaquio Lannister was not looking to flee or surrender. He did not wear the white cloak and armor of a Kingsguard knight. He wore golden armor decorated with the Lannister lion and an ornate gleaming lion helmet. He discarded a long lance of golden wood and wielded a gilded sword and golden shield with long golden locks blowing back over his crimson cloak. Jon wondered if even Aemon, the Dragon Knight, or Daemon Beckfire had ever looked as regal. Then the Kingslayer walked to the western ridge, and Jon knew his ultimate objective: to cut his way past the entire honor guard and kill Robb Stark. Jon took out his crossbow and special bolts and rushed past Brynden Tully to stop Jaime Lannister, followed by a silent white wolf. Jaxley Mincer was known throughout the Seven Kingdoms as a deadly fighter with the rage of a lion and an arrogant disregard for dealing or facing death. That reputation was well-deserved, as he cut a bloody swath through Stark, Free, and Karstark men. Few people would think killing a dozen warriors to kill a lord feasible, but then there was only one Kingslayer. Jon had never seen a sword so fast, or a man so dangerous. There was 4 fighters left between Robb and Jaime. Jon arrived on the scene just as the Kingslayer smashed the pommel of his blade into the side of Robin Flint's head, knocking him unconscious to the floor before thrusting the sword through Darren Hornwood's shoulder. The heir to Hornwood fell bleeding on the ground. Dacy Mormont stayed in front of Robb with a shield and spiked mace, while Eddard Karstark stepped forward to grimly exchange blows, his battle-axe whirling in short and controlled loops. The Kingslayer defended, and then when Karstark struck, parried the downstroke and pushed with his wrists, sending the blade down to the ground. It was the same exact motion that Jon had used in the duel at Winterfell, except the longsword forced the axe clattering to the ground. Lannister raised his blade, dripping with blood, to strike a final blow. "Kingslayer," Jon yelled, Ghost by his side. Lannister turned to face the crossbow, his shield protecting his chest. "Do you think you can really hurt me? My armor is the strongest steel in the Seven Kingdoms. If you miss, I will gut you, boy," Jaime said, dancing on his feet. "Drop your sword," Jon said, with a confidence he did not feel. The problem with crossbows, like siege machines, was loading speed. Even with the well-designed reload mechanism, he would only have one shot. Jaime Lannister smiled, an arrogant, immoral smirk as he lunged forward. Jon shot not at the shield, but over him. The missile was no crossbow quarrel, but a net that opened, with weighted bits of steel, and dropped over the knight. What the bloody blade stuck out through the holes of the net, and the shield was stuck. "I will just slice your net in half, boy," Jaime said. Jon's eyes turned dark red, and he felt the anger of another soul, primal and powerful, surge. The wolf blood rose in him. Then his perspective changed, and Jon looked at the Kingslayer not over the crossbow, but upwards at the waist and legs. Blood dripped down his heavy canine teeth, and a great desire came to rip the arrogant twat in half and crush him in his powerful jaw. The blond man had threatened his packmate, and no dire wolf could accept that. Ghost burst forward, dodging the clumsy longsword, and grabbed the steel weights of the net in his teeth and ran at full speed, all 150 pounds, flying like the wind. The wolf knocked Jaime Lannister off his feet and slammed the right arm, cushioned by the steel, into a tree. Ghost locked the net in his jaws and pulled up, and Lannister went head over heels, head slamming on the earth, sword flung away by the violent burst. The dire wolf bashed the man twice against the tree, his bloody mouth so close to ripping through the flimsy gorget that sealed the back of the throat. It would be so easy to end this, simply flip the Kingslayer onto his back and plunge his sharp teeth into the battered face, ripping through eyes, nose, and mouth. He could smell the blood pumping under the fair white skin and taste the fear. Then there would be no more threats to Grey Wind. "No, Ghost, we need him alive," Jon said, as he tried to push down the wolf spirit. The white dire wolf glared, but then backed down, dragging Lannister's body over to his master. The teeth were bared, ready to bite down on the throat. Jon took the golden sword and held the point at Jaime's neck. "Do you yield, sir?" The Kingslayer nodded. As the news of the defeat spread, the rest of Lannister's men threw down their arms. Jon sat down hard on the floor and rubbed Ghost's neck and nuzzled the nose. The rush to protect Robb had exhausted him, although he was certain the dire wolf was barely winded. Grey Wind sauntered and howled in the dusk. All around the valley, Westermen surrendered. The North had won. "Jon, you have captured the Kingslayer." There was no trace of jealousy in the happy congratulations. Robb stepped past the honor guard and embraced his brother, as excited as if he had won the battle in the Whispering Wood by single combat. A battered Jaime Lannister lay sprawled on the ground, dirt all over the red cloak and dented armor, helmet askew. Grey Wind and Ghost chased around their masters, snapping playfully at each other's haunches. Jon realized the wolves were still eager to hunt, howl, and stalk. The Starks treasured their dire wolves, but the beasts were natural-born killers, heralds of the northern gods. The first men cut the throats of animals and men to bleed out on altars of weirwood trees. The blood dripping from the jaws of Ghost and Grey Wind were not much different. "I am exhausted, Stark. Acolytes do not train to run around in battle at the Citadel. A book in the library suits me better than a crossbow," Jon jested, straining to be heard over raucous cheers throughout the valley. The Umbers were not quiet men, and even the normally placid Silver Eagles of Seaguard joined the celebration. "You need to spar more in the yard, Snow," Robb smiled. "We have won a victory, but there is a great deal more to do," Robb said as men bound the Kingslayer with thick ropes. "Did we have many casualties?" Jon asked. "Very few, I think. Our men kept their line together, and the Lannisters were fleeing left and right. Besides, Hornwood and Flint, my honor guard, suffered no wounds." The Lannisters were crushed as much by their horses falling as our men. Not a good way to die, Robb said, looking at the many dying steeds screaming as they were put out of their misery. I will see to Darren Hornwood. Robb, you need to go forth. Urge the men to take as many hostages as possible, for ransom and trade for our Lord Father and sisters. I need to speak to our forces. We have to organize our men for an attack, and we should be at the gates of Riverrun by the morning. The Lannisters will know something amiss when Jaime and his knights do not return. We have to check who we captured or killed, what forces they may have led, and any hint of the defenses near Riverrun, Robb said. More lords came every minute to congratulate Robb on the great victory. The boisterous Small John pantomimed with hands and arms how he single-handedly stopped the Lannister charge to an excited crowd with the Great John laughing by his side. Brynden Tully came by with Jason Mallister and May J. Mormont, and Jon spotted Catelyn Stark walking down the western ridge, escorted by Hallis Mullen and Theon Greyjoy. Theon's brash voice carried over the crowd, as great a victory as the field of fire, my lady. I vow that the Lannisters lost 10 men for every one of ours that fell. Does Theon think he is the warrior reborn? He sat on the hill and shot a few horses, and most of the arrows bounced off. Daisy Mormont japed, cleaning bone and brains off her mace. Jon turned to Darren Hornwood. Jamin had cut him in the shoulder, but it was a stab, and not a more dangerous slash. Several blood vessels flowed near that area, and the Hornwood heir bled, but not as much as he would if the channel delivering blood from the collarbone to the arm had been cut. Chet, Clydas, Denys. Jon cried as he gently took off Hornwood's gorget and shoulder greaves. The three boys popped up immediately, worry visible on their face. Start a fire. I need plenty of water to be boiled. Do we have cauldrons? No, master. Only a few water skins. But we could make a cauldron, Chet said. What if we used armor? Clydas pointed at the golden plate mail. If we seal the bottom with a piece of metal, we could boil water over a tripod. Jaime Lannister looked aghast that anyone would use the finest suit of armor in Casterly Rock as a teapot. Spears, sir, we could interlink 3 spears together to form the base. Put helmets on top, and the water would boil. Denys added, Good thinking, lads. Better than many masters. Gather the other boys and set to work. Boil as much clean water from the river as possible. Bring me the light brown pouch with the silver pin. I have herbs, needle, and thread there, Jon said. He had not forged the silver link for medicine, but he had taken a class on healing with Elorez under Archmaster Abros. Unlike the brilliant but dubious Qyburn, Abros was dull, pedantic, and extremely thorough. He was the Citadel's expert on disease and infection. The Sphinx gifted Jon a doskin bag and silver pin to celebrate the practical exam where they dissected a corpse together, and were the only duo to correctly label every major blood vessel, even surpassing larger teams of experienced students. Lord Snow, the young Karstark, approached him. War axe tightly clasped in both hands, as a ritual offering. Daisy Mormont and Wendell Manderly looked on with interest. I am a Snow, but no Lord Eddard, Jon said. I owe you my life. The Kingslayer would have gutted me like a fish if you had not faced him. I pledge my axe to you until I can return the favor, Eddard said. You were willing to give your life for my brother and your liege lord. That is all I would ever ask, to protect Robb. Defend him with honor, guide him with good counsel, and take the piss out of him whenever you can. Even the future Lord of Winterfell deserves a jape or two, Jon said. Thank you, Sir Snow, Eddard said with a smile. Jon saw no need to correct the Seared. It was merely a mark of respect. He turned to Darren Hornwood, who was trying foolishly to get up. Rest, Seared. I will bind your wound. Do you have to burn the infection? Will I lose an arm? Is that why that boy is starting a fire? Darren looked at the red-hot spear tip with dread. What? No. Chet is only boiling water. You have a cut. Deep, but not too bad. But first, the wound needs to be cleaned before we can apply medicine and bandages, Jon said. Will I live, Master Snow? Darren asked, slightly delirious. You will be fine. It may take a few weeks to heal, but with proper care. The cut is no danger. It may take longer for you to wield a sword at your full strength. After that, Jon assured him. You are a maester. I was captured in battle by a maester. Jaime groaned. His father was definitely not going to be impressed that the Lion of Lannister was taken by a bookish healer. Actually, I am only an acolyte, Jon said. He disregarded the mocking laughter of others at the Kingslayer as he pressed hard on Hornwood's neck with a wet towel, wiping away dirt and dried blood, and putting pressure to stanch the bleeding. Jon followed Daisy Mormont and her sisters, Jorah and Lyra, to the command tent. Robb quickly called a war council to quell the wild celebrations breaking out. Northerners had already guzzled a few wineskins at hand, and if the Northern Army liberated Riverrun, Jon was certain the stores of wine and ale at the castle would be immediately gone. I captured a knight with my mace. His shield had a prancing purple unicorn. Jorah snickered. No wonder he surrendered. He was ashamed of his house. Sigil. What a bunch of Nancys these southern men are, Lyra retorted. Axley will be sorry she missed this. She would have loved a chance to fight in a real battle, not just Ironborn raids. Daisy said, speaking of the second sister who had stayed at Bear Island. Battle, half of them got squished to death by their horses. The other half threw down their weapons before any fighting. At least you faced the Kingslayer, Daisy. The bards should write a song. The she-bear and the lion. Lyra said, Apologies, Sir Snow. The maester nets. The lion sounds less grand. The lion in question pretended not to hear. Jaime Lannister, stripped of the golden armor and the crimson cloak, shuffled slowly, hands and ankles tied together in thick knots. Eddard Karstark and 4 other members of the Honor Guard, hands on their weapons, escorted their most valuable captive. 2 men stood on each side and Eddard followed behind, axe ready, vigilant for any attempt to flee. As he should, Jon thought. This was still a dangerous man. The tent overflowed and hundreds of men stood outside, but the crowd parted for the Mormonts. Jeers broke out of Kingslayer and Sister Fucker, but Jaime just smirked as Eddard walked him to Robb. Even captured, Jaime's hubris remained, and his eyes promised the well-known words of his house. The Lannisters always paid their debts. The Stark heir stood, the crowd's attention on him, with Catelyn Stark and the Blackfish at his side. Jon squeezed into a seat near the front, between the rather spacious Wendell Manderley and the lanky Daisy Mormont. My lords and knights, the North and the Riverlands have won a great victory. My thanks go to all, but I would recognize my great-uncle Ser Drynden Tully for leading the Outriders and my brother Jon. Robb said. Loud cheers erupted from all sides of the tent, and even a few Freys applauded. Robb and Frey, and the men around him, did not. Jon Snow captured the Kingslayer. The crowd roared again, shaking the tent. The 2 younger Mormont girls winked, and Wallace Manderley leaned over his brother and whispered that he should walk forward. Jon stepped up next to a smiling Robb and a scowling Jaime and turned to the crowd. My lords, I did not do this alone. Small Jon Umber and the Foresters sprang the trap, and Robb's honor guard stood bravely against Jaime Lannister. Robin Flint and Darren Hornwood fought with courage, and Eddard Karstark and Daisy Mormont were ready to give their lives for Lord Stark. These men and lady deserved the glory of the capture. With that, sections of the tent broke out in applause for their preferred champions. Lord Hyaxley's Hornwood sounded a bizarre low and long grunt, something between a croak and a moan. Jon found out later that was the noise made by a bull moose rutting. He promptly tried to forget that fact. The Umbers chanted catapult, catapult, and drowned out the Karstark men while Lord Gregor Forrester hugged his 2 sons. All 3 branches of House Flint, the Mountain Men, the Seamen of Widow's Watch, and the Hill Men of the Finger, united in celebration. Nobody was louder, though, than Daisy's younger sisters, who cheered so lustily that Megs Mormont rolled her eyes to the ceiling. After a minute, Robb held up his hands for silence. He had allowed the crowd to vent their energy before moving on to more serious matters. The Kingslayer is not our only prize. We have captured many lords and knights. Lord Quentin Bainfort, Lord Gobbin, Westerling, Ser Titus Brax, Lord Rhaegonard Estrin, Ser Cleos Frey, and Ser Garth Greenfield. The Lannister forces have lost many of their leaders. By the morning, they will know the Kingslayer is missing. We will ride in the dead of night and surprise them before they awake, Robb said. Lord Stark, do we know how many men they have, and where? Stiveron Frey asked. We defeated 2,500, we believe. There are 12,500 men left, Robb said. Jon realized why the Freys started to grumble. The Freys only wanted to attack when they had an overwhelming advantage. The North would be meaningfully outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise and an advantage in cavalry. We should put our captives to the question. We can learn numbers and location. Raymond Frey said, I would be happy to ask these questions. An ugly young man stood up, big-boned and slope-shouldered. He had small eyes and a small mouth, but his lips were wide and meaty and the eyes close-set and hard. He was pale and pink, like all color had been drained from his face. What is your name? Robb asked. Ramsay Dustin, the man said with a wet-lipped smile. That was odd, Jon thought. Lady Dustin had sent no cavalry, and this Ramsay wore no sigil. We captured free riders among the Lannister horse. If we offer them their freedom, they may tell us, Robb said. How do you know a sellsword won't lie? We have 1,000 prisoners. What does it matter if a few disappear? Ryman countered, House Stark does not approve of torture, sire, Robb said sternly. My lord, who will watch the prisoners when we ride? We cannot leave many men behind. Yalbar Glover asked. Robintree Hall is only a few miles away. I will ride and see if House Blackwood would allow the use of their dungeons, the Blackfish said. That solution might work for now, Jon thought, but it was not a permanent answer. The Blackwoods were an old and well-respected family, with a stout fortress for an ancestral home. But valuable prisoners needed to be kept close at hand, not doled out and spread through the Riverlands. Thank you, Sir Brynden. My lords, I urge you to eat and rest. The time for merrymaking is over. Riverrun is a hard 2 hours ride from here. Night will fall soon. In 8 hours, we will break camp and march to defeat the Lannisters, Robb said. Jon had no time to wait. He needed to return to Darrenhornwood, but first he had to speak to Robb. As always, the heir to Winterfell was engaged, but Jon locked eyes with Robb and his brother quickly dismissed the rest of the lords, including several disgruntled Freys. The last to leave the tent were the Blackfish and Lord Mallister, who would both ride for Reimagined. Robb ordered the Stark guards to patrol outside and ensure their privacy. Robb invited Jon to sit. The lords think I am being foolish. The Freys are not the only ones who think torturing prisoners would yield valuable information. Robb said, You are your father's son, Jon said simply. Both boys knew that Ned Stark would never torture a prisoner, even one he hated. Yes, and he is in the black cells in King's Landing, Robb snapped. All the more reason to treat our prisoners fairly. If not us, then who? The northern houses will follow your lead. And if you allow torture, what else will our men do? Jon said. Robb rubbed his chin, and Greywind simultaneously scratched his side. Jon was amused and wondered if he and Ghost ever did the same exact thing. Aye, you are right. We agree. Do you know what the men call you now? Robb said with a hint of laughter. They whisper you have magical powers with wood and metal, summoning bridges and casting enchantments on our enemy. Jon rolled his eyes. A few claim you are a sorcerer from Kors. Warlock, Jon said. Kars has warlocks, not sorcerers. What is the difference? Robb said, puzzled. Who knows? I am no expert on strange men with blue lips who claim great powers that they never show, but I do have an idea, and it may involve magic, Jon said. Robb immediately straightened up and paid Jon his full attention. Go on. In the battle after I trapped Lannister with the net, something strange happened. I felt the wolf blood rise in me, and I saw the Kingslayer not from my eyes, but lower, and then I attacked and grabbed the net with my jaws. I became Ghost. I wanted to kill him, to rip his face apart with my teeth. It was difficult even to stop, Jon said. You are a warg, Robb said softly. I think I am one too. The night before you came, I dreamt of a white wolf who would fight by my side. When I sleep, I have wolf dreams of hunting boar and elk in the wolfswood. The other packs howl, but they kneel when I pass, offering their kills to me. Many times we hunt together, and Summer and Shaggy Dog follow. Sometimes, when I wake, I can still taste blood in my mouth. Jon nodded. He had similar dreams, although in some he saw a beautiful and fierce she-wolf, gray fur and dark golden eyes. She was a proud queen and ruled a pack of smaller gray cousins. Dozens of them, but she allowed Ghost to nip at her heels, playfully. How large is the wolfswood near Winterfell? Jon asked. It is huge, Jon. It extends as far west as Sea Dragon Point and south as Torrens Square. It reaches all the way to the mountains' clans in the northeast, and even to the edge of the White Knife. It must be over 100 miles east to west, and perhaps even longer north to south. Some say the Wolfswood only ends after the Bay of Ice, Robb said. So further from Winterfell than Riverrun is from here, Jon said. What are you saying, Jon? Robb said. Ghost can run 50 miles to Riverrun in 2 hours. He can follow the trail of the Lannister army. When he gets to the castle, I can ward into him and see through his eyes. We would know the defenses and the guard posts, so there would be no question of where the camps are and how many men, Jon said. For a moment, Robb was struck silent by the audacity of the plan. Old Nan used to tell us stories of skin-changers, but she said that a man could lose themselves in the animal, and too much time as a ward would change you, and not for the better. It is a risk worth taking. We are in a war. We need every advantage, Jon said. Perhaps Grey Wind should go as well, Robb said. Jon shook his head. Robb, if there is danger, let me take the risk. Ghost is silent and blends into the moonlight. We don't need Grey Wind roaming around and all the other wolves bowing and scraping to him like a royal wheelhouse passing. Robb smirked. All right, I will find you in a few hours, and whether this succeeds or not, you have my thanks. Will you rest now? No, too much to do. Come find me later, Stark, Jon said. I will, Snow. After parting with Ghost, Jon returned to the stream where a worried Lord Hornwood sat next to his son and heir. Per his orders, Chet and his friends had boiled water in multiple strange vessels, helmets, breastplates, even horse-boarding. The Wintertown crew constructed a bed of wooden planks for Daeron Hornwood, and Jon was pleased to see various poles, water skins, and his cloak cleaned in the stream and dried by the fire. A few members of the honor guard sat close by, including Eddard Karstark watching over a sullen Jaime Lannister. Jon's belly grumbled slightly at the smell of roasting meat as the Mormonts ate nearby. Jon took items out of the duskin bag, metal and bone needles, thread, bundles of herbs, and small stoppered jugs. The last item was a pouch with a rolled-up coil of yellow-brown cloth. Jon took the cloth out gently and unrolled it on his cloak. He then washed his hands thoroughly in the stream before heating the needle in the fire. Gather around, lads. I will show you how to heal, Jon said. The Wintertown crew gathered closely, waiting for him to begin. If there is only one thing you remember, it is this. Stay clean. Before you treat or heal, make sure everything is clean. Dirt is the enemy of health. Everything must be clean. Your needle, the thread, anything you would put on your patient must be clean, and certainly your own hands. Jon said, now examine the wound. The boys looked at the bloody mark on Daeron Hornwood's shoulder, dripping pus and blood. Before you seal the wound, it must be cleaned of things like bone, hair, stones, dirt. The ancient Valyrians called this debridement, the removal of dead and foreign material from wounds. Jon turned to Daeron Hornwood. This may hurt, but it will mean the wound will not fester. The Hornwood heir nodded bravely, but his father put both hands to his eyes. Jon unstoppered a bottle and soaked a small piece of cloth. He then applied the cloth to both sides of the wound, wiping away anything that was dead. Daeron grimaced and bit down hard, but did not scream. Satisfied, Jon took the needle and thread and began to sew sutures on both sides of the wound. The needlework swift and elegant. Then he placed some dried herbs on the bolt of yellow cloth, cut with a knife, and wrapped the dressing about the shoulder. Done, Jon said. That's it? Lord Yeathas Hornwood yelled. Don't you need to do anything else? No, the only thing now is to keep that area clean and moist, so it heals. Also, here Hornwood should drink a lot of water, Jon said. Master Snow, can you tell us what you used and why? Chet asked. Of course, this is a bottle of apple cider vinegar. When you ferment wine for too long, it becomes vinegar. They discovered this in the Empire of Geese 5,000 years ago, and that it had medicinal qualities. I used the vinegar to irrigate and clean out his wound. With heated needle and thread, I closed the cut. The herbs are sphagnum moss, readily available in the neck. Dried out, it reduces infection, and the cloth, that too, is from Essos, the city of Meereen. This is linen, made from flax, and it allows the skin to breathe. It is better than most cloth for dressings and bandages, Jon said. And I will recover fully? A surprised Daeron asked. Well, nothing is certain, but you should. The best thing now would be rest. Actually, Chet, skin some horse legs. Boil them with water and make bone broth. It will be easy for patients to drink, Jon said. Maester Snow, House Hornwood is grateful. As Lord of the Hornwood, I would grant you land or hunting rights, or Eli's Hornwood said. Jon waved it off. It is nothing. If you wish to give a reward, give it to my boys. Darren Hornwood fought for my brother. That is more than enough for me. Jon walked over to the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister. Do you wish to save some of your men? What do you want, bastard? Jaime said, attracting angry glares from many Northmen. Exactly what I said, to save your men. There are very few northern injuries, but many knights and soldiers fighting under you were hurt. Some may die and others will be crippled for life. I can't treat them all, but I can help some. And why would you help them? Jaime asked suspiciously. I was trained in healing at the Citadel. I would rather not see people die if it can be helped. Besides, my boys could use the practice. I don't have time for japes or a cock-pissing contest. Do you not care if your soldiers die, Lannister? Jon said. Are you certain this is a good idea, Maester Snow? Eddard Karstark asked. We are at war with them. The exchange with the Kingslayer attracted the attention of many, and Jon felt the many eyes of the Mormonts, Glovers, and Karstark men on him. That is true, and in a war, we have the right to kill our enemy. But wars do not last forever, and these are captured prisoners, valuable to trade for ransom or our own men. If they die, then that is our loss. And if they need to be saved from death or being crippled, then they can hardly fight. At the Citadel, we are taught that everyone deserves healing, and that your house should not matter, Jon said. All right, what can I do? Yazier said, you will still be tied up and under a guard, but walk among the prisoners, and tell them I will treat them. For those I can save. I will, Jon said. Master Snow, perhaps you can stay here. Chet and I will bring the patients, Daenerys said. But how will you carry them? Jon asked. Cletus placed a long plank on the crude three-wheeled dolly. He scavenged some horse bridles and tied it around the bed to help secure any wounded. We can use this, Sarah. We can roll them, like we did with the false catapults. Cletus said, Very well, half of you go with Lannister. The others stay here and prepare to work. Remember, I can't help the dying. Bring me people who are injured and can be healed. Jon said, as Eddard Karstark, Sador Don Olak, and Daisy Mormont left to escort the Kingslayer. Jon worked methodically as Chet and friends rolled in patient after patient. He set broken arms and legs and showed the crew how to create splints for the bone to heal. He washed and cleaned wounds with boiled water and then vinegar. He removed arrows, took out stones, treated abrasions with salves, and knitted the undamaged flesh together as much as possible. For some injuries, he applied honey. For others, he pounded the sphagnum moss into a black paste and brushed it on the closed wounds. When he ran out of linen, he ripped up cloaks to make bandages and made the bindings loose so the skin could breathe. When he finished, the helpers carried away the patient on a plank, and Jon began anew. After the first dozen patients, Jon lost track of the number, focusing only on treating the injuries as efficiently as possible. After the third dozen, he ran low on supplies and was forced to improvise, stripping thread from garments and boiling cloth and water to make more bindings. After each operation, he washed his hands and sterilized any needles in the fire or boiling water. There was no dream wine or milk of the poppy, so those in pain bit down on leather bridles. Jon treated boys and men alike, squires and knights. From their dress and sigils, he knew that the patients were highborn, but sadly, he could not treat everyone. He tried hard to avoid any amputations, preferring to use strips of leather tightly bound to reduce any blood loss, and instructing the boys to release the tourniquet 30 minutes after the operation. The Wintertown crew did their best to support their master. They gave water to drink, washed the injured areas first, fed bone broth after the operation, and made sure that bandages were kept moist. He could not save everyone. That would be too much to ask even in better conditions. But he saved most, and he warned others that if they kept their bindings clean, there was a good chance to avoid infection. All around Jon, beds began to appear. Crude planks, where patients rested and recovered. Rings and rings of squires and knights tended to by small folk from Wintertown, as their master continued his work by the light of a fire. Luckily, Chet was intelligent enough to make certain a lane was free, so that new patients could be brought quickly to the center. When the Westermen first came, many were suspicious, some were frightened, but by the end, all were grateful. They called out their names to thank him. Willem Lannister, a young squire, Titus Brax, Lord of the Prancing Unicorn, Muller the Dornishman, Sargarth, Greenfield, who strangely was the head of House Greenfield, but not a lord. Jon ignored the talk. He was far more focused on his dwindling supplies. He had no doubt that these men were the enemy still, and while he was happy to heal others, his first priority would always be his brothers and sisters. A crowd of curious Northmen, Mormonts, Glovers, Umbers, Karstark, and even Patrick Mollister, and a few Freys gathered to watch the surgical theater unfold. Every castle had a maester, and many lords and heirs had seen medical treatment before. But the scale and scope was far different. In a few hours, Jon had treated more than 60 men, a number that would have struck the Citadel as unfathomable. Finally, the stream of patients began to stop. As Jon's limited supplies and replacements for supplies were exhausted, he could do little more. He had no moss, no herbs, no vinegar, and no honey left. Had the Northmen not drank all the wine, he might have used that, but he doubted there was a drop left in the entire valley. And then Robb made his way through the crowd, the Blackfish at his side, to find him. They walked past curious Northmen and rivermen to Robb's tent. There were 3 boys there, tall and thin, dark-haired and serious. The first 2 wore burnished scarlet armor inlaid with an intricate design. A flock of 11 ravens flying on a red field surrounding a black shield with a dead white weirwood tree. The youngest was even taller, almost 7 feet tall, but gawky and gangly, and more skilled with a book than a sword. Jon recognized the sigil, of course, House Blackwood. In the Age of Heroes, they ruled the Wolfwood around Winterfell before the Kings of Winter drove them out of the north. Jon looked quizzically at Robb, but the 3 Blackwoods followed the Blackfish into the tent. Jon and Robb sat down on the same side of the table with the Blackfish and the Blackwoods facing them. Olivard poured cups of water before leaving the tent. "This is my brother, Jon Snow." "Sir Brynden, please introduce your guests," Robb said. The oldest boy, perhaps a few years older than Robb, interrupted. "I am Brynden Blackwood. These are 2 of my 5 younger brothers, Lucas and Hoster. Our father, Tydos Blackwood, is trapped at Riverrun. Before the Lannisters set their siege, he sent us a raven, saying that Edmure Tully was captured and that he retreated with the remaining rivermen into the castle. Lord Blackwood named his heir after me," Sir Brynden said. "The Blackwoods are loyal servants to House Tully. Lord Stark told me what you have planned, Master Snow. I invited the Blackwoods here to help. I have not returned to Riverrun for 15 years and served in the Vale of Arryn. I am not certain if things have changed around the castle. Lucas and Hoster visited House Tully only a few months ago. They could help guide us better." Robb Stark, looking every bit the heir to Winterfell, spoke. "Before Jon begins, all of you in the room must swear that you will keep this a secret. We do not want anyone from the North or the Riverlands to know about this. I will be most wroth if anyone talks." "Know about what, Lord Stark?" Hoster said. He shrank at the glare from Robb and a swift elbow from his brother Brynden. The 3 brothers swore the oath of secrecy, and the Blackfish followed. "Jon is a warg," Robb said to the gasps of the Blackwood boys. "He has sent Ghost ahead to Riverrun, and he will attempt to see through his dire wolf's eyes. I find it difficult to believe, but I trust Lord Stark on this," Sir Brynden said. "I trust my brother, Saren," Rosied. Jon closed his eyes. He reached for the wolf, and he saw him in his mind's eye. Ghost, quiet, alert, hidden behind a pine tree under the moonlight. His human body felt slow and sluggish, but the dire wolf welcomed his spirit, and Jon's eyes glazed over and turned milky white. He felt quick and strong, and all the exhaustion of the night disappeared, replaced by a desire to run free and hunt with his littermates. There was a she-wolf far away that he yearned to find. Jon forced his focus back on the many tents surrounding the tall castle. "I see a castle and a river wide and the water blue-white. A fast current. The castle is a triangle and has red sandstone walls and towers that command all 3 sides. There is water all around the fortress. There are thousands of tents north of the river," Jon said. "What banners do you see?" Robb said. "Can you see in the dark?" Hoster squeaked, to the annoyance of his brothers. "He's a wolf. We hunt at night," Robb said brusquely. "I see a golden lion on a crimson field. That is the most common one. But there is also a black, hooded man on a gray field within a golden fence of fire. I see a brindled black and white boar on a brown field, and 6 white seashells on yellow sand," Jon said. "House Lannister, Banefort, Crakehall, and Westerling all resting in the camp north of the Tumblestone," the Blackfish said. "Jon, Is there any cavalry? Robb said. Not north of the river, but to my right, south of the river, I can smell horse, but not too many. Perhaps a few hundred. That would be to the west. Do you see any other tents? The Blackfish said. Most tents are north of the river, but to the left, south of the fork, there are 1,000 tents, much less than the north. I see a red bull on a field of gray. I see a large white tower with 3 turrets. There are 100 horse near the banner, with the tower, Jon said. The first banner is House Prester, but what is the second? The Blackfish said. That is the sign of Free City of Tyros, Hoster said. The Lannisters have hired Tyroshi sellswords, Robb said. Interesting, perhaps Tywin can't raise more men. Why hire mercenaries if you can reinforce yourself easily? On my right, across the river, there is a purple unicorn on a silver field. 4 red double-headed eagles, a green field with 2 sets of white lines. Jon continued. House Brax, House Yestrin, and House Greenfield, the Blackfish said. So the Lannister forces are split into 3 camps, with most soldiers on the northern part. Tyrosi sells words and free riders in House Prester to the south, and 3 other houses guarding the west. Rosied, Giant, what about the guards? How many? Jon held his hand out for silence. Ghost ran swiftly through the trees, watching with his hard garnet eyes, and sniffing around the northern camp. Not many. 10, perhaps 12. I could kill them all. 6 pairs walking about the camp, Jon said. Only 12 guards for 4,000 plus men? The Blackfish asked. We have captured many of their commanders. Perhaps they have lost their discipline, or the Kingslayer may have been too confident. Robb mused. What else do you see, Maester Snow? Tell me more of the castle, the Blackfish said. There is a great water wheel on the north side of the red walls, covered with ivy and near a red rusty arch with an iron portcullis. There are many boats tied up to that gate. I see men on the walls with fish crest helms, Jon said. Tally men, perhaps with a few Blackwoods. That is the water gate on the north. Hoster still keeps boats tied up there, the Blackfish said proudly. So what would you guess the numbers to be? Robb asked. The north has the most men. Then to my right side, south of the river, the west has several thousand with some horse but not many, and to my left side, south of the river, the south has the least with the Tireshi, Jon said. Are there any bridges? Have they managed to connect the forces? Robb said. No, I do not see any. The campfires are lit far from the water. There are no lights near the river. Wait, Jon stopped for a minute. On the north shore, I see logs lashed together in a square. The Lannisters must have built some rafts to cross. There are many pine trees near Riverrun. They could have cut some down, Lucas Blackwood said. But the tumblestone runs very fast, and the raft is only large enough to bring a few men and no horse. Robb thought aloud. Do you see many rafts? The Blackfish asked. I see some on the west side, but not many. They do not look very strong. The rafts on the north shore are to the right of the castle. The Lannisters have no real way to cross. 3 camps, all separated by water, but that is a problem for us too, Robb thought. Then he chuckled. How fast do ravens fly? 50 miles an hour, give or take. But Robb, they don't fly at night, Jon said. The pupils of his eyes began to return. Same year, Brynden. I have our plan. I know how to smash these camps. Brynden Blackwood, I need to borrow ravens, several of them. Jon, let Ghost rest there. Grey Wind will meet him at the north camp before the dawn. Robb said. Raventry Hall is yours, my lord. We have ravens aplenty, and my brothers and I only ask to fight by your side. Brynden Blackwood said, Your father would skin me alive if his sons were hurt, the Blackfish said, and he would be humiliated if his sons did not fight to rescue him. Brynden retorted, The Starks are fighting for their lord father. Why should we not risk our lives for ours? Enough, Robb Stark commanded. You are welcome to fight. We have only a few hours before we must ride. Let us all get rest. By dawn tomorrow, we will be at the gates of Riverrun. Lord Stark, there are simply too many prisoners. The speaker of those words ignored the red face of the Blackwood heir who had promised Robb otherwise. Morva Blackwood, a niece of Lady Wind of the Great Tourney, was the lady of Raventry Hall, and she was more than a match for her eager sons. The Wents of Harrenhal were famed for generosity, but Lady Blackwood leavened that with common sense. But mother, we need to rescue our lord father, Brynden Blackwood sputtered. Do you not think I do not want Tytos back in my bed? The dark-haired matron snapped. Your father took many of our retainers with him to Riverrun. Counting young boys and old men, Reventry has less than 70 men. How can we guard 1,000 prisoners? More of a turn to Rob, my lord. Reventry Hall has strong walls, high towers, and a deep moat. But the dungeons are small and the cells are few. We can hold 400 or 500, but even then, for not very long, and not the most dangerous prisoners. Left unsaid was that the castle did not have the supplies sufficient to feed so many, and that Lady Morva did not wish to host Jaime Lannister as prisoner. The lords in the tent began to speak over each in their haste to offer thoughts. My lady, we could leave troops with you, the Blackfish said. My knights would be happy to guard the plunder, Reimagined said. Even after the battlefield was looted for weapons and supplies, horses and suits of armor remained in the thousands, as well as valuable, highborn prisoners. Jon had no doubt of the greed in Ryman's eyes. We could wait for reinforcements before we attack the forces at Riverrun. In 6 days, Lord Bolton and Lord Karstark should join us. Then we would outnumber them. Stevron Frey said, Lord Stark's battle plan depends on surprise. If we do not attack soon, that will be gone. Jason Mallister said, We cannot spare many troops, and we must ride soon to get to Riverrun. Robb said, We cannot afford to lose our prisoners, my lord, Galbart Glober said. There is a simple solution to that. We could cull the less valuable ones. They would have died anyway in battle, Reimagined Frey said. The Northern Lords glared with loathing, and even some Freys disavowed the suggestion. The Rivermen were disgusted, but such ideas matched their expectations of Sir Raymond. Before greater bickering could break out, Jon interrupted. Perhaps we could transport the most important prisoners while leaving the more injured at Reventry Hall. Jaime Lannister must be watched at all times, and there are other commanders too valuable to lose. The dungeons of Riverrun would be the best holding area after Lord Stark defeats the Lannisters. Is that possible, to take so many captives to Riverrun without the army? Robb asked. Possible, yes. Easy, no. Jon replied, But Master Snow, how many men will you need to guard 500 on the open road? The Blackfish asked. Not many, Sarah, the Wintertown boys, and perhaps a few of our injured, like Darren Hornwood, Lady Blackwood. Are there any extra supplies at Reventry Hall? Nails, lumber, wagons, chains? Jon asked. My lord husband took much when he marched. But you are welcome to look, the lady said. The castle may not have many supplies, but there is a yard near that serves the merchants of Ramsford and Fair Market for trade on the Blue Fork. They owe taxes to Reventry Hall and would have a great deal of supplies. Hoster Blackwood said, A shipyard? Now that is interesting. Jon's eyes gleamed brightly. Is it well stocked? Yes, since the Lannisters declared war, the Trident has been closed for trade, Hoster said. Then, my lords, I can bring 500 captives down. I would be slower than the army, but I would arrive by mid-morning. Is it not dangerous to bring the Leinster men south? What if we lose the battle at Riverrun? Stevron Frey asked. It was not an unreasonable question despite the furious glares and angry whispers in the tent. Stevron Frey was not craven, but he was too cautious, as suited a man who had waited 50 years for his father to die. Then again, many of the Northmen were too fearless, and that too could be exploited in war. Only the Blackfish and the Blackwoods knew of Ghost's role as a scout, and why Robb was so eager to roll the dice on attacking a host double their number in war. Fortune favors the bold, but only if they prepared well. Lord Stark will win the battle, Jon said, and I will bring Jaime Lannister to him in Riverrun. Aye, my lords, we have taken the time to debate, but now is the time for action. We need to be bold, to strike with all of our might, and crush the Lannisters once again. We will teach the lions to fear wolves at their door. Robesier, the confidence in his voice carried over to the cheers of the crowd. That was only words, though, and the real challenge lay ahead. Morva Blackwood was a force to be reckoned with, as the bleary-eyed yardmaster and the anxious merchants would attest. She had ordered her men to drag them out of bed in the dead of the night and bring samples of everything stored at the yard. The tradesmen had even loaded donkeys with masts, oars, spars, and an entire sail, along with more sensible items like nails, cloth, rope, and pitch. Jon appreciated the thoroughness, but he had no use for the larger items, and without wagons, no way to carry them. How much cordage do you have at the yard? Jon asked. Cordage, Sarah the head merchant asked. He means ropes. We have a great deal. Cords, ropes, rigging. There are hundreds of feet of rope needed for every boat to raise masts, sails, ladders, and flags. We have ample supplies, and there are even boats that can be raided if you need. The yardmaster answered, And are there good men who can work knots and bring me every single bit of rope in the yard? Jon asked. He wanted to work as quickly as possible. Yes, but seer, we are tradesmen. This is our livelihood, and we are not warriors. We do not wish to see a battle between armies, the merchant babbled. What are you saying? Are you refusing to help my father? Brandon Blackwood asked, hot-headed as any Umber or Karstark. Jon wondered if the Blackwoods had the wolf blood. Then again, the Blackwoods were exiled from the north in the Age of Heroes. Peace. He does not wish to risk his men in battle, and he deserves compensation, Jon said. House Stark would be grateful for your service. We would pay a handsome wage for men and supplies. I speak for Robb Stark and promise that we will not cheat you, nor will we be cheated. Your men will face no danger and would not go south. The more you help us now, the quicker the prisoners leave your lands, and the sooner the Blackwoods can rescue their Lord Father. Thank you, Seer, the merchant said. We will bring men we can trust. As many as can be found, make certain they know they will be paid fairly. Bring me all the rope and cordage, and any nails, pitch, and cloth. We will buy it all, Jon said. But that is a very large amount. Sir, the merchant said, we have an army. I will need all of it. A bright gibbous moon was setting in the night sky as Jon oversaw the multiple teams scrambling about the field, sailors unloading giant coils of rope off donkeys, a score of boys saddling horses, and soldiers separating the two groups of prisoners. The Northern Army had exited the Whispering Wood into the wide-open fields of grass to the south. Only a few honor guards waited for their liege as Robb Stark said last goodbyes to Lady Blackwood and Jon Snow. The matron embraced her two older sons, but Hoster would stay with Snow. You have only 3.5 hours to sunrise, brother, Jon said. How can you measure the time so accurately at night? Robb asked. By the moon. Aristarchus of Samos, an astronomer from Essos, charted the moonset versus the hours of the day. He also measured the distance from Planetos to the sun, although the mathematics are unproven. Jon said. Robb nodded. He had certainly not learned that in lessons with Maester Luwin. I am glad you are watching Jaime Lannister. I worry that Robintree Hall could not hold him. Do you suspect the Blackwoods of deception? Hoster says his father leads the garrison at Riverrun. If he worked for the Lannisters, the castle would have already fallen. Jon said, I don't suspect the Blackwoods, but the Lannisters are the wealthiest house in the Seven Kingdoms with a large army and great influence. Tywin Lannister does not know yet that we have his son, but he will soon, Robb replied. You fear bribery, that he would send a message to a bannerman promising riches and power if they return his son, or threaten to destroy their house if they do not betray us. I believe that Lady Blackwood also feared such a threat. All the more reason we should keep Jane Sime at Riverrun. The Tullys will not be tempted by the Lannisters, Jon said. I can imagine how the Freys would receive such an offer, Robb said. Have you heard something? I, Olivar Frey, my squire. He tells me that Reimagined, Frey, and his children are total shits. Ryman inherits after his father Steffron Frey, the oldest of Walder's sons. Olivar says Reimagined is worse than Walder Frey, Robb said. The Freys continue to be a problem, Jon. They doubt my strategy and urge the other lords to wait for our infantry. And how many battles have the Freys won? Jon asked. Robb smiled. I have only won one battle. One more than the Freys. After they stopped chuckling, Jon spoke again. You are doing the right thing, brother. You have the advantage, and that is when you must strike. You are a good battle leader, and your army knows that. They look to you for leadership. They look to you also. The men wonder at your skills. They have never seen a maester like you, Robb said. I am not a maester, and there are no maesters like me. There's only me. Jon smirked. He paused for a moment. I can bring the prisoners down, but I may have do things you do not like. I cannot be kind. I need to be hard, even cruel. You may not wish to defend my actions. Robb stopped him. We are at war. I trust you, brother. You will do what you must. We are not knights from songs or Robert Baratheon at the Ruby Ford. We are wolves. All we need is to bring father and our sisters back. At the Citadel, I read the lives of the 4 kings. Grandmaster Caith says a king can be too cruel, but also too kind, and that can lead the realm to misery. A boy may be sweet, but a king must leave that behind. We cannot be green boys of summer. Jon said, we cannot. If we are too weak, Tywin Lannister will destroy us. I understand, Jon. We need to be cruel to be kind. When Greywind meets Ghost, I will direct our direwolves to gut every scout at the North Camp first, and then we will attack sleeping men. Kill the boy and let the man be born, Jon said. Hooray. We may be 10 and 6, but we are not boys any longer. Too many people rely on us. I will free Riverrun by murdering as many Lannisters in their tents as possible, Robb said. And I will bring the prisoners down. They will not escape, not alive anyway, Jon said. Good luck, Snow. Robb mounted his brown courser. Jon waved a brief goodbye to his brother. There was a great deal to do. Jane stood with Holster Blackwood and Darren Hornwood in front of scores of bound prisoners. A few hundred more were still guarded by men from Raventree Hall, but even those would be able to hear his words. The sailors and Wintertown boys waited expectantly as hundreds of horses snorted nearby, saddled and watered. Jon's hand crossbow was at his hip, secured by his belt. He turned to speak to the captives. I plan to ride to Riverrun. You will come with me, bound on a horse. If you should resist or try to escape, you will not live to regret it, Jon said. A loud snort of derision came from a pale, portly man with a small face and small pig-like eyes. And how do you expect to do that, bastard? You only have a few dozen men, and most of those boys are cripples. That last comment was directed at Darren Hornwood, whose right arm was still in a sling. A few Lannister men laughed, but most were quiet. And what is your name? Jon asked. Sir Laurent Lorch. The man puffed up. Jon saw a black manticore, embroidered on his jerkin, and noted a nearby man at arms with the same piggish looks, perhaps a natural son or a cousin. Jon thought, so you are related to Amory Lorch. He is my brother, and a finer knight you have never seen. Tywin Lannister favors our house, and the old line will have his revenge if you harm me. Lawrence bragged. I see, Jon motioned for 2 tired horses to be brought over. These were not the huge destriers that Surigami and the best knights rode, but smaller chargers for light cavalry. 2 sailors grabbed Laurent Lorch and placed his hands bound behind with knots on the rear of the saddle, while another handed Jon a long rope. Boys, observe the knot carefully. Jon tied the cord around the wrists using the raised cantle as the post and brought the working end over the standing part. He continued behind Lorch's hands and then threaded the working end over the standing part again and under the riding turn, forming an overhand knot. He pulled firmly on the 2 ends and it tightened, eliciting a yelp from Lorch. This was a constrictor knot, related to the clove hitches used by sailors to tie the shrouds of sailing ships. Slavers had perfected the knot in Essos, and once tightened, it was extremely difficult for a prisoner to untie. I will escape, bastard, and then I will have your head, or my brother will kill you, a dozen times. Laurent raved, like he did to run as Targaryen, brave to kill a 3-year-old. Jon said. Chet brought the second horse over, and the sailors dragged the Lorch man-at-arms, forcing him into the saddle. Jon took both ends of the rope and brought it to second horse, quickly tying the constrictor knot around the wrists, and then a double knot about the second cantle. The rope was nearly taut, and the distance between the 2 horses only a few feet. Maester Snow, shouldn't we use more rope to give more slack? Chet asked. The others, yes, but not this one, Jon said. He raised his crossbow and spoke to the crowd. Now watch this escape, and then he shot the front horse in the rear with a bolt. The first horse squealed and bolted, while the second horse stood still. Lorch fell over the back of the saddle, smashing the ground. But it was the second man who screamed louder. The frenzied jerk had ripped his right arm off at the shoulder, but his left was still attached to Lorch and the ropes connected to the second saddle. The unknown man flew forward in the air as the second horse whinnied at the strong pull. Sarchi Lorch was being dragged on the ground, his face smashing against rocks, his bones breaking, pulling the now one-armed man and the second horse. A short and bloody trail could be seen, although it was hard to tell whether the blood belonged to the horse, Lorch, or the second man. Jon reloaded the crossbow and shot a bolt. this time cleanly through the head of the first horse. The animal fell, and the second horse quieted down. Now that the force was gone, sailors cut the cord to salvage the second horse. The second man bled out on the ground, blood pooling from the right shoulder socket. Lorchwit's barely alive, but both arms flopped uselessly, and his face was battered into mush, his mouth bloody and broken. Lorch had pissed and shat himself, and the dreadful smell and pitiful cries from the crippled knight elicited no sympathy. Tie the prisoners up, lines of 8 horses in a row, all hands bound at the wrists and cantles. Give them more slack than these two. Make the constrictor knots tight, Jon said to his crew as boys and sailors rushed to comply. No one paid attention to Laurent Lorch's motionless body. Jon took charge of several prisoners directly. Jaime Lannister, Willem Lannister, Cleon Frey, and Tion Frey. He tied the knots himself, with Darren Hornwood watching, a spear in his left hand. Willem grunted in pain from his broken arm when Jon pulled the knot tight. For Jaime, he used a double constrictor knot on the saddle and on the wrists. Even with a sharp knife, it would take many minutes to cut through. I thought we would be 8 in a row, Jaime said. It was a weak jape to show the younger cousins that the Kingslayer had no fear. 8 horses, yes, Jon said. He loaded the back 4 with pitch, nails, and rope. If you attempt to run, you will drag your relatives to their death. And that's before we cripple your horse. I wonder if you lose a full arm or only the hand if you tried. They finished quickly as no prisoners resisted. The sailors were experts at knots and tied them with great skill. Jon thought for a moment about recruiting these men. But he gave his word. He thanked the Lady Blackwood for her help. But she looked stunned at the brutal efficiency of the operation. The lines of 8 horses formed a row of 13. There were 5 rows with a few empty spots for tools and supplies. The Wintertown boys rode on the outside, each equipped with a sharp spear and a few rocks. They had orders to jab the horses at any escape attempt. Hoster Blackwood came back with the merchant. Jon beckoned the workers to visit him, as Darren stood guard over Jaime and his cousins. A few other Northmen also mounted, to guard the flanks and scout ahead. Jon paid the merchant 30 gold dragons for the rope and supplies. He promised more if the tradesmen could bring wagons of supplies to him after the battle. He gave 20 silver stags to each sailor, and many men thanked him profusely for the generosity. Finally, Jon gave 2 golden dragons to the yardmaster, who promised that if House Stark had any need, he would be happy to serve. Jon mounted the sturdy Darren and placed journals, weapons, and supplies into the saddlebags. Hoster would carry the many ravens they needed so he could keep his hands on the crossbow. The front line of prisoners were all valuable knights, lords, and heirs. In an attempt to escape, the first rider of the line would suffer but had a better chance of survival. The prisoners in the middle would get ripped apart if the horses broke in multiple directions. We will maintain a steady trot. If anyone tries to escape, we will aim for the horses. All 8 of you will be dragged or pulled, and your horse will still be tied to the other 7, Jon said. You clever cunning bastard, the dark-haired man with a surcoat of seashells said. Gawain Westerling, Jon thought. If you wish to die or become crippled, go ahead, Jon said. It is your choice. There is no honor in this, a burly blond man, perhaps an Estrin, said. Where was the Lannister honor when you burned and pillaged the Riverlands? How many small folk did you rape and kill? Jon said. That was not us. That was the Mountain and Sellswords, Tydos Brax said.
Right.
And Tywin Lannister did not give orders to burn the Riverlands. You are just innocents who were shocked that the Mountain's men loot and rape, Jon said. Ride for Riverrun, and if you try to escape, I will make you pray for death. As Jon rode his Garen over, he took a sharpened spear from Chet and skewered Laurent Lorch through the back and the stomach. Still alive, he will probably take 6 hours to die. I want to be at Riverrun before that. The rows of horse cantered south. They had gone less than an hour before Jaime Lannister spoke. The ride had been silent, and despite the fears of the prisoners, the horses had marched together well, without breaking stride. It was pitch black, and they traveled only by starlight. And despite curious looks by Hoster, Blackwood, and Darren Hornwood, Jon did not speak. He urged his companions to stay vigilant over the captives, rather than talk. Bastard, Jaime Lannister yelled. Yes, Sir Jaime, Jon asked. Unable to turn fully on the horse, Yake motioned with his head backwards. Willem Lannister, a young blonde-haired youth, was struggling, his face pale and nearly slumping off the horse. His broken right arm clearly gave the boy troubles, and Willem could not have been older than 10 and 4. "My cousin, his arm is broken," Yake said. "I know that. I bound the arm a few hours ago," Jon replied. "If he rides like that for a day, he might never recover," Jaime said. "So," Jon said, "he is 13 years of age," Jaime said. "And my brother Bran is 10 years of age. Your family crippled him, and then they sent an assassin to kill him," Jon said. "You have no proof," Jaime said. "We have a Valyrian steel dagger left with the catspaw." "Who would give a Valyrian steel dagger to kill a 10-year-old? That is why Lady Stark arrested Tyrion, which caused your father unleash the mountain on the Riverlands," Jon said. "Tyrion had nothing to do with that. He wouldn't kill a child, and Willem is young. He is hurt," Jaime said. "And what do you propose?" Jon said. "I swore to bring him to Riverrun. Let me ride next to him, and unstrap Willem so his arm is not tied behind his back. You can keep his wrists bound, but at least in front, I can support him if he falls. I can ride with my hands behind my back," Jaime said. "That would make escape easier." Still, Willem looked in great pain. His horse was still tied to the 6 behind him, so Jon had no doubt he could run Willem down. On the other hand, Ymio was a far better horseman. Even if his horse was tied to Willem's side, there was a small chance the knight would escape if he somehow miraculously managed to cut the ties. "You can't trust the Kingslayer. He is a liar, an oath-breaker," Darren Hornwood said. The Hornwood heir and Hoster Blackwood had edged their horses closer. "By what right do you judge a lion?" Jaime shot back. Jon snorted. "That is absurd. You judged Brynden Tully as a fool who would attack an army of 15,000 with a few hundred men. You judged Robb Stark as a green boy, easily beaten. Why can't we judge a lion? Why are you so high and mighty? My father considered you an oath-breaker when he saw you with your bloody sword on the Iron Throne. Ah, the honorable Ned Stark, who brought a bastard back from Dorne. I am not ashamed of killing the Mad King. It was a noble act," Jaime said. "It is not the killing of Eris that stains your white cloak. Shiro, what of Roig's Siemens, Aegon? They were 3 and 1. Why did you not defend them against your father's monsters? What knight allows the children and wife of his prince to be butchered?" Jon said. "I did not know they would be attacked. I was in the throne room," Jaime said. "A likely story, Kingslayer. Your father probably ordered you to stand by," Hornwood snorted. "Sirlakie, had you known that your father ordered the death of the 2 Targaryen children, would you have defended them?" Jon asked. "Yes, I would have saved them. I regret their deaths. I failed Prince Ragarkar," Jaime said, the bitterness clear in his voice. "But that has nothing to do with Willem. I owe on my honor as a knight that I will not try to escape before Riverrun. Let me help my cousin." Jon ignored the snort from Darren Hornwood. "Swear it on the Targaryen children that you failed. Swear that you will not run." Jane Lannister made the oath. With a sharp knife, Jon sliced the rope connecting Jaime's horse, as the Kingslayer rode next to his ailing cousin. Jon took the remnants and tied a knot between the 2 pommels. He sliced the bindings about Willem's wrists and freed the injured right arm, but bound the left wrist tightly to the rope connecting the 2 horses and the rope tied to the frays. If Jaime fled, Willem's left arm would be injured far worse than his right. "I see you do not trust easily," Jaime said. "I trust you, but it is better to have less temptation than more," Jon said. The blond boy shook with relief as his right arm dangled in front of his body, away from the knots of the rope. "Thank you, my lord," Willem Lannister said gratefully. He looked pale, but there was less pain in the face. Jon looked at Jaime. "Thank you, maester," Jaime said with reluctance. "I am neither a lord or a maester. Remember your oath not to escape, Saitraigsie. And for you 3. Jon turned to Willem, Cleos, and Tan Frey. "Do not take this as a sign of weakness. If you run, you will suffer, just like Lorch. I swear that—" The older Frey kept his head down, but Taxian Frey's gaze flickered from Willem's arm to Jon Snow. "Sarksar, what will happen to us? What do you intend to do with us?" the sandy blonde asked. The Frey squire might look like a lion, but he was more easily frightened. "What do you think we will do?" Jon replied. "The Septons say the North believes in human sacrifice, that you will slit our throats and feed our blood to the weirwood trees," Tang said. The faces of Willem Lannister and Cleos Frey tightened with alarm, but Jaime Lannister stayed quiet. The Kingslayer was made of sterner stuff, Jon thought, or at least had a few ounces of common sense, unlike his younger cousins. And why exactly would we do that? Jon said. The trees give you power. A seer can see through the faces carved in the trees, or visions. Maester Kraisla says that the trees may allow a man to skin change into a beast. Tane said, Your maester is an idiot. Jon said, If human sacrifice gave magical powers, people would do them all the time, not wait for a war. And if I wanted to feed your blood to a weirwood tree, I would go to Raventry Hall, not Riverrun. Our weirwood tree is dead, poisoned by the Brakens. Hoster Blackwood said, A terrible loss. The weirwood trees are not evil or dark. They grew in Westeros long before the first men came and were tended by the children of the forest. What people did not know, they destroyed. It is a tragedy to have so much knowledge lost, Jon said. But thousands of years ago, men did offer blood sacrifices on weirwood trees. Hoster stammered. Was that the fault of the men or the trees? Jon said. He turned to the Lannisters and the Freys. You are worth more to House Stark alive than dead. If your families are sensible, it will stay that way. They continued in silence for another hour. Jon stayed alert, eyes alternating from Jaime Lannister to the multiple rows and lines of men on horses. In the darkness, it was hard to identify faces, but there was little doubt that the column was moving in a steady and coordinated manner. The prisoners, even the proudest lords, had given them little trouble, because even a single escape could cause deadly ripples in the lines of 8. Rob would be almost at Riverrun, Jon thought. He pushed his consciousness and reached for Ghost. The White Wolf was not frenetic like his big brother, or as wild as his little sister. Ghost was silent but as deadly as any of his litter mates, and a fully grown dire wolf could kill anything but a dragon. Jon could feel the hunger building, the desire to hunt, to kill with the pack. Jon tasted blood in his mouth, rich and sweet. He bit the back of the neck of a guard, and the bite snapped clear through the bones that supported the skull. Grey Wind was at his side, ripping apart another soldier's face as blood gushed on the grass. Easy prey. The packmates moved to another patrol, running so quickly that both White and Grey blurred in the pre-dawn light. Grey Wind sprang, knocking the first man down and lowering his bloody jaws. As the second man turned, Ghost teeth snapped on the exposed throat, and no alarm was raised. In a few minutes, Ghost and Grey Wind slaughtered a dozen guards, and the northern camp was silent. The packmates loped north to find Grey Wind's human. Robb Stark waited, thousands of horsemen standing by, ready to charge with the dire wolves at his side. Master Snow? Hoster Blackwood's hesitant voice broke into Jon's thoughts. It is almost sunrise. Jon nodded. Hoster handed over the cages of ravens. The black birds woke from their slumber, eyes alert for the scraps of parchment in his pouch. Ravens ate the dead, and they would feast well tonight. The Durrell fit the task to summon more fighters into the battlefield. After attaching the notes, Jon released the birds. Stony Hedge, Wayfarer's Rest, Acorn Hall, Pink Maiden, Atranta. Robb had written to the Riverlords loyal to the Tullys and asked them to ride that morning for battle. Even as Robb attacked from the north and the Blackfish from the west, the Rivermen would seal off the south and the east and destroy the Lannister host. My men have orders to shoot down any ravens, Jaime blustered. Your men will be too busy dying to worry about birds, Jon said. He could taste blood in his mouth again and hear the faint screams of the dying. In his mind's eye, he was at Grey Wind's side, and the two dire wolves were killing Lannister men and horses with abandon. Maester Snow, Hoster squeaked. I am not a Maester, Hoster. Just call me Jon. Jon, Chet tells me you studied at the Citadel for 4 years. When did you know you wanted to be a master? Hoster asked. Lord Stark forced me to go to Old Town. I never wanted to be a Maester, Jon said. The only thing I wanted was to fight by the side of my brother Robb Stark. So I should thank the Lannisters for such an opportunity. Be careful what you wish for. My father is a great battle commander, Jaime said. Your father, Tywin Lannister. What battles did he win? He is feared and respected by everyone. The Reigns of Castamere celebrates, Jaime said. He destroyed 2 houses. He burned down Tarbeck Hall and drowned men, women, and children in the mines of Castamere. I heard that he had at least 3 times as many men as Roger Ryan. Does it take a great military mind to defeat a force 1/3 of your size? Jon asked. He has other victories to his name, Jaime said. Yes, he sacked King's Landing when the gates were open through treachery. His great feat was to kill Elia Martell and 2 young children. What did he actually do in the Greyjoy Rebellion? Lannisport was burned in the first strike, so the Lannisters had no ships. Stannis Baratheon and Paxter Redwine defeated the Iron Fleet, and as for the invasion on Pike, the Ironborn are shit fighters on land, Jon said. My father has never lost a war, Jaime said. He never fought against the Starks in battle, Jon replied. A crash could be heard a few lines over. Jon turned his head away from Jaime to see a knight with a sigil of a silver helm on a green and black field, lunging awkwardly for Dennis. He rode over quickly. Dennis was fending off the knight with a spear, and Jon noted that he was the 4th rider in the line of 8 captives. What happened here? Jon asked. I didn't tie the knot well enough. He managed to get his right hand out, and then he grabbed for me when I was close. Denise said. Why didn't you just jab the horse? Jon asked. Maester, if I did that, all the other men and boys would die. Demi said, still shaking from his close escape. Jon aimed the crossbow at the riderless horse, ignoring the fear on the faces of the other prisoners. I die proudly for the Lannisters and Casterly Rock. The red-headed men yelled defiantly. Jon lowered the crossbow. A martyr. And what is your name? Sir Daemon Broom. My family has served Casterly Rock for 200 years. Do your worst. Tywin Lannister will hear about this. The man spat. I hope he does. Jon shot a bolt in the man's right knee, and Sir Daemon cried in agony. Jon dismounted, and he slashed the rope behind the knight, leaving 2 groups of 4 horses. The steel tip of the quarrel stuck out of the back of the knee, but the goose feather fletching remained at the front of the leg. Chet, tie both arms at the wrist to the rope. Make certain that it is tight. Please. We didn't try to escape. The riders on the horses in front of Sir Daemon Broom pleaded. There were 2 knights and a squire, and all 3 wore different sigils. None of them were Lannisters. Jon reloaded the crossbow. The red-headed knight moaned with pain, his face on the ground. Jon checked the knots to ensure that Chet had corrected Daddy's error. He turned to the 3 horses in front, leveling the crossbow at the middle horse. Ride or die. The line of 4 horses started again, at a brisk trot, pulling the prisoner to his feet. The knight screamed as the injured right leg hit the ground, leaving a bloody trail. The horses could outpace even the fastest runner, and the injured knight had no chance. In a minute, Sir Broom was being dragged on his knees, and his howls of agony filled the night. Does anyone else care to walk? Jon asked the prisoners. No one answered, and few were even brave enough to meet his eyes. He rode back to keep watch over the Lannisters and the Freys. Sir Daemon's father was my master-at-arms at Casterly Rock. Jaime said. He wanted to die proudly. I granted him his wish, Jon said. No doubt the Leinster bards will write a song for his bravery. He spoke loudly to be heard over Sir Broom's screams. Ned Stark would never do such a thing, Jaime said, eyeing Jon Snow carefully. I am not Ned Stark, and neither is my brother, Robb. Joffrey Lannister imprisoned my father and my sisters. We will not forget that. Robb Stark and I do not care about the riches of the Westerlands, or Tywin Lannister's reputation, or that you fuck the Queen. We care about the crimes of your house against our family. Do Lannisters pay their debts? A great deal is owed to House Stark, and Robb and I will collect on it, Jon said. There was nothing more to say, and the only noise left as morning rose were the sounds of Sir Broom begging for mercy. It took hours for the night to die. Jon smelled the carnage even before he could see the smoke. The camps were burning, and ravens had flocked to the battleground to feast. Eagles and hawks had joined their smaller brethren in devouring the dead. He reached out for Ghost, slipping into the bond with ease. The White Wolf and his brother rested, and even Grey Wind had burned off his frenzy. 5 hours of killing would do that. If Ghost had relaxed, the North had won the battle. Grey Wind would never be at peace if any risk remained for Robb. Jon shook off the budding malaise of complacency. Generals had died on the verge of triumph, and princes had been usurped on the eve of coronation. The greatest danger often occurred at the moment of victory, and Jon would not fail his brother. He urged Darren Hornwood and Hoster Blackwood to remain vigilant. He wrote to his Wintertown crew to remind them to stay disciplined as they neared the Tully Castle. And most importantly, he watched over the 4 captives. The Kingslayer had kept his oath, directing his energy in the past few hours to supporting his cousins. Jaime Lannister had been accused of many sins, but the man was not without honor. Still, Jon kept his crossbow cocked and checked the bindings again, while the Lion of Lannister smirked. The sandstone walls of Riverrun came into view, and Jon heard the rushing waters of the Tumblestone as they passed the final hill. The tents on the northern side were destroyed, and bodies littered the grounds, many barely half-dressed. Over 1,000 Stark bannermen and horses milled about in the camps, and half a dozen wrecked rafts were tied to the north bank. He could see thousands more south of the river, and there were several new banners, a pink dancing maiden in a swirl of white silk, black dragons and white towers, a dark plowman on a brown field, and 6 brown acorns on a yellow field. On the castle walls, dozens of men rained arrows down on a corner of the field. The battle was not over, Jon thought, even if the victory seemed apparent. "We have done it, sir. We reached Riverrun," an excited Holster Blackwood said. Lady Mormon and Wallace Manderley came over, and their men tended to the prisoners. No one voiced any concerns for their treatment, or the enormous amount of rope that connected horse to captive like a malignant spider web. Jon had left the Whispering Wood with 500 captives. 497 had made it to Riverrun in 6 hours, unwounded besides the bruising on the wrists. Kill the boy, and let the man be born. Had he been less cruel, more would have died. He wondered if anyone would ever believe his actions to be merciful. "I did it. I dragged them down, and these are the most valuable to our cause. Sir Shameby, but also Lord Banefort, Lord Westerling, Lord Estrin, Willem Lannister, and the Freys." Jon wondered how Eddard Stark would react to his actions. "Denies, make a splint for Willem Lannister's right arm. Come, Sir Jaime. Robb Stark will want to see you." Jon walked behind the Kingslayer, looking for a way to cross the river. Behind him, northern men and boys relieved the Wintertown crew and forced the prisoners to the ground, unloading their horses. After a few quick words, the heir of Hornwood and Hoster Blackwood followed Jon to the Tumblestone. "Holy Snow!" Jorah Mormont hailed him, mace in hand, as she and her older sister watched over a score of disarmed knights. "I captured a prancing purple unicorn too," Lyra said, pointing to a bruised middle-aged man who looked like a drowned seal, if a seal wore plate armor and frowned through his mustache. "The idiot tried to cross the river in a raft right into our attack. The men in the castle threw rocks, and half the rafts tipped over. He was lucky the Mormonts were there to drag his fat ass out of the river." Jari said. "I think that is the father of the knight you captured, Jari," Jon said. "Like father, like son. What a bunch of idiots these Westerlanders are." Lycra snorted. Jon smiled at the fierceness of the she-bears. "What happened in the battle? Why are you not helping Robb south of the river?" Darren Hornwood asked. "This is the strangest castle ever. There is a water gate on the north side, but to cross you need a boat." Jory pointed to a wide arch and a heavy iron portcullis, half covered in water. "The Blackfish took most of the rivermen, and the Umbers to attack the west side while we attacked from the north. And in the middle of the morning, more horns blew from the south and the east. House Piper, House Vance, Smallwood, and Goodbrook Knights." Lyra continued the tale. "We destroyed the first camp with ease, but we couldn't cross the river. Lord Stark sent 1,000 horsemen to follow the Blackfish to a bridge many miles downstream, and the castle garrison brought boats through the Watergate. Manderley men and the Flint sailors of Widow's Watch brought men and horses to the castle. But it took a long time. If we could attack the west and south from the north, the Lannisters would have lost in the first hour." That was true. But if Jaime Lannister had not been forced to divide his forces into 3, Rose's bold attack would have faced twice his men. Jon had no doubt his brother would win, but the casualties would be much higher. "So what is left?" "How many Lannister men are left in the south and west?" Jon asked. "The Turds to the south surrendered or ran away, but there are still over 1,000 holdouts in the west." Jari pointed to a clump of footmen and horse in a triangle at the corner of the Tumblestone and the sluice gate. "The third leg was surrounded by Northmen, but the enemy had formed a shield wall, and mounted cavalry with lances guarded both ends. Heavy shields were placed on the ground and over their heads, deflecting a steady shower of arrows. Spears, mounted and on foot, were set against any charge. Robb had greater numbers, but the remaining Lannisters, Estrins and Craycalls, intended to sell their lives dearly. Cavalry alone would find it difficult to break through the forest of shields and spears. Get me over to Rob. Sir Jaime, you shall accompany me. Hoster, ask Chet and Clytus to bring rope and pitch, Jon said. Jon walked off the raft, with a small crew of armed men and women guarding the Kingslayer. Hoster and Chet had followed, with several other boys carrying large jars of pitch and coils of rope slung over their backs. An entire mass of lords and heirs surrounded Robb. Jon mused at his brother's ability to effortlessly attract followers. Lyra and Jory waved at their big sister Daisy, and Hoster ran ahead to join a smiling Brynden and Lucas, and a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, a hooked nose, and a magnificent raven-feathered cloak. That person could only be their father, Tydos Blackwood. "Jon," Robb called, and the crowd parted as he went to his brother's side. "I see you have brought the Kingslayer and almost 500 other prisoners. How goes the battle?" Jon asked. Many eyes watched the two brothers. He was familiar with the Great Jon and the Honor Guard, but not with all the Rivermen. There was a handsome knight with a wine-stained birthmark, a short bow-legged redhead with hands on hips, and a shabby man with dirty clothes and bruises on his face, being held up on both sides by the Blackfish and Tydos Blackwood. From the auburn hair and blue eyes, Jon deduced that was Edmure Tully, Robb's uncle. "The north is clear, Lord Mallister. Reinforced with Piper and Vance troops are chasing down Forley Prester's spearmen to the east. House Bracken sent a raven, saying they will cut the escape. The Tyrosi Sellswords have surrendered, and are willing to fight for us. There are still 1,500 infantry, and a few hundred horse on the western side. We have told them to surrender, but they refuse," Rhodes said. Jaxley Lannister snorted, pointing out the brindled black and white boar. Even captive, the Golden Knight retained a sense of command and grandeur. House Craycall is famed for being stubborn. Their motto is, "None so fierce," and Lord Roland Craycall has 3 sons. He will not bend the knee willingly. "We can just wait them out. They will have to charge us at some point," Raymond Fry said. "Why would they charge?" the Great Jon sneered. "They have fresh water. They could make a stand for hours, even days. We have no infantry to attack a shield wall." "We could force the Kingslayer to ask them to yield," Ryman said. "Go fuck yourself, Frey," Jaime said. Small John Umber chortled, and several other Northmen barely contained their laughter. "Lord Stark, isn't the answer obvious? Riverrun must have scorpions and catapults. Why not just bombard the shield wall with artillery?" Jon asked. Edmure Tully turned his eyes to the ground, and the other rivermen looked embarrassed. Tydos Blackwood sighed and spoke. "Riverrun is not well stocked for a siege. The Maester has not maintained the siege weapons well. We threw our last stones this morning. Had you not come in a few months, our supply of food would be gone." Jon stopped himself from raising an eyebrow. The garrison left at the castle was small. If there had not been enough food for our months, the Rivermen were truly not prepared for war. "I still say we charge them. They killed Lord Vance at the Golden Tooth. His son deserves revenge." The short, fat redhead said. Jon noted that the knight with the wine-stained birthmark ignored the looks of sympathy from the crowd. "Many men will die. That charge would be bloodier than our entire victory so far." Robe said. "Lord Stark, I can force them to bend the knee," Jon said. Robb ignored the surprise on the faces of the rivermen. "Jon, how many men will you need?" Jon looked around the battlefield, littered with wagons, tents, and 3 large wooden towers. Built hastily by the Lannister host, the siege towers were 40 feet high, which would have been impressive had the walls not been 50 feet tall and surrounded by a substantial moat. 6 or so, but strong men like Small Jon Umber and Eddard Karstark. The Umber heir preened and flexed his bulging biceps while Jon walked off to prepare. A crowd of Northmen gathered around as Jon instructed Chet, Clytus, and several other boys. They clambered up the first siege tower like monkeys, daubing the pitch in strategic areas. The drawbridge on the west gate was open, and a steady stream of wood bundles and dry straw shuttled out to the field. "Why exactly did you build these siege towers?" Jon asked. "It is a siege. You need siege towers," Jaime said. "They are shorter than the walls." "And how exactly did you plan to cross the moat?" Jon asked. The Kingslayer shrugged. "I assume they could build them higher with time. The Lannister army has shit siege engineers. Boys, pay attention." A crowd of rivermen and Northmen clustered around. But the boys of Wintertown paid attention as Jon pointed to the bottom boards of the siege tower. This is poorly constructed. The foundation needs to be larger, and in a strong wind, the tower would tip, or if it got hit by a large enough trebuchet missile. There is also not much space for a boarding plank or catapults. Master Snow, how tall could you build a siege tower? Chet asked. Good question. With enough wood, clay, and men, at least 75 feet high. I would build a massive ramp with earth and wooden supports to drag scorpions and onagers to the top. I imagine only a few castles could resist. Dragonstone, Storm's End, Jon mused. Could you take Casterly Rock? Jaime asked curiously. Without trickery, you would need a serious advantage in numbers, but it is possible. With trebuchets, an attack by sea and land, Jen said. In any case, we end this farce now. The Umbers attached thick ropes to the base of the siege tower and dragged it next to the remaining resistance. Jon stood on the second floor of the tower. Lannister men, surrender or die. Catcalls and hoots of derision came from the Westermen. Jon shrugged and stepped down the steps. He lit a torch dipped in pitch and dropped it on the bottom platform piled with straw and wood. Copious quantities of pitch were smeared on the walls, and every floor contained flammable material. Puffs of smoke began to appear on the top of the tower. Jon took a short axe and chopped at the supports facing the Lannister men. Eddard Karstark and Roderick Forrester hacked at the other side, and soon the tower began to list, even as flames flicked on the outside. The siege tower began to burn. Jon turned to Jaime Lannister. It is not too late. You can save them. They fought for you. Jaime Lannister nodded and spoke. Lord Caracal, the Northmen are serious. They will burn your men. A giant of a man as tall as the Great Jon, with a big booming voice and thick black mutton chops, responded. None so fierce, Leinster. None so fierce. Two teams of Northmen, one headed by Eddard Karstark and the other by Small Jon Umber, grabbed a rope tied to the long poles on the two front sides. The tower erupted in fire and with a great heave fell on the top of the shield wall. The horses bolted in panic first, mad from pain, and the screams of men followed as they began to burn. The shield wall disintegrated, the second and the third siege towers were pulled closer, and Jon ordered the crew to dip ropes, straw, and wood into pots of thick, dark pitch to feed the inferno. The smell of burning flesh pervaded the field. Stop, stop, Lord Crakehall cried. We surrender, we surrender. Throw down your weapons, Jon said. The remaining Lannisters, Crakehalls, and Istrans rushed to comply, although some had already jumped into the river to avoid the flames. Jon turned to Robb and the two dire wolves staring at the fire. Lord Stark, Riverrun is yours.